Welcome to the March 7, 2023 City Council meeting. I hereby call the meeting to order. Members of the public may attend this City Council meeting in person or may watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and at the city's website at www.wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting, in advance, or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you will be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You will be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. Second item this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask everybody who could please stand and follow along. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The third item on the agenda this evening is the roll call. Please let the record reflect that all members of the council are present. Also, I'd like to note that earlier this evening, the council did participate in a workshop and discussed the following topics. We conducted an interview for boards and commission vacancies. We received an annual update of the Energy and Environment Committee and an annual update of the Heritage Preservation Board. The next item is to approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as is, or would anyone care to make any changes?
Madam Mayor, so moved.
Turn your mic on, please.
Madam Mayor, so moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Next up this evening is a public forum. As a reminder for those members of the public in attendance this evening who are interested in speaking, we ask that you please state your name, address, and indicate if you're representing a group. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If the item you wish to speak about is something that is on the agenda and you are in person, we ask that you fill out a form at the table at the back of the room and hand it to staff. For those that are watching via Zoom, please send a note via chat to staff and let them know what agenda item you wish to speak about. We also require that your camera is turned on when you speak. Our first item on the public forum this evening is the swearing in of Police Officer Travis Groth. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I say this every time, but it bears repeating. This is one of the most, I get the most pleasure out of doing this, and part of my role as city manager, to administer the oath of office for fine peace officers that we have for our community. Even if there is a beautiful toddler making some noise, that adds to it all. I said it's a great honor to do this, and I mean that. You know, our city, this type of position, obviously, Officer Groth knows what he's walking into. I don't envy that, but he's walking to a city that, while the challenges of being a police officer are great, there's so much support here in our community, and he's walking into a department that has tremendous leadership. A department that cares for its employees, an organization and city council that cares for its employees. We're really lucky that Travis, or that Officer Groth, has decided to continue his professional development and serve our community. And he's lucky to be here in this environment and working for such great people in a great community. So it's a great night, and I'm pleased to administer the oath. I know Officer Groth started as a CSO, so we've had a few officers that have started that along the way, and it just speaks to Officer Groth's growth as a public servant and the job that he's done. So in that, I'm going to be quiet now and administer the oath, and then after that, we'll do the pinning, and then Police Chief Schultz will have a few words to say. And if Officer Groth wants to say a few words as well, you've got a several minute speech prepared, correct? So we'll do that, and then if we want to maybe pause for a few minutes afterwards, and Mayor, if you want to say anything too, we'll have time for that too. Sound good? Cool. Well, let's start out with the oath and make this thing official first. So Officer Groth, if you could come towards me, please, and raise your right hand and then repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Travis Grove,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution of the United
to
States,
support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and to discharge faithfully
and to discharge faithfully
the duties of the office of police officer
the duties of the office of police officer
of the city of Wayzata, Minnesota,
of the city of Wayzata, Minnesota,
to the best of my judgment and ability,
to the best of my judgment and ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. And if one of Travis's loved ones want to come up and do the pinning, that'd be great.
Who do we have doing the pinning this evening? Oh.
This is a point as from a workers' comp perspective, I'm holding my breath. We'll get a couple more pictures of that in a second here, but Chief Schultz, you want to come up?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Knowing that some of the people here tonight and watching online may not know a whole lot about our officers, I usually like to share a little bit about our officers at their swearing-in ceremonies. I usually ask the officers if they'd like to write a short bio about themselves and something that they'd like me to share with the public, and also ask them to tell me one thing about themselves that many people probably don't know about them. So, Travis got me his bio last night, and I have to say, for a guy who writes a really good police report, it was a little dry. So I tweaked it a little bit. For those of you that do know Travis, it likely doesn't come as a surprise to you that he doesn't readily like to talk about himself. He's a relatively reserved and humble man, but he's a man who has a lot to offer his community. Travis grew up in Maple Grove and eventually attended Maple Grove High School. During this time, he became involved in the Police Explorer program. Travis's father served as an officer with the Plymouth Police Department for 26 years and is responsible for getting Travis started in the Police Explorers program there. In Travis's words, his dad paved the way for him to follow in his footsteps and left very big shoes to fill. Travis spent 5 years with the Plymouth Police Explorer program, learned a lot, and eventually obtained his first law enforcement job right here in Wayzata as a community service officer. Shortly after that, he also began working for the South Lake Minnetonka Police Department as a community service officer. Travis was an immediate contributor to our community and quickly demonstrated his work ethic by working as many hours as he could, as many hours as we'd let him, going to school nearly full-time, and starting a family. He attended Normandale Community College, where he received his associate's degree in criminal justice and attended skills at Hennepin Tech. In his short time here in Wayzata, he's shown an incredible amount of pride and dedication to our community by committing fully to be a part of our team. We immediately knew we wanted him to be a part of our organization for a long time. Travis was eventually offered the lead CSO, community service officer position, and ultimately encouraged to apply for the police officer position. Now, Travis's interests and hobbies, this is what he wrote, involve anything outside: fishing, hunting, riding his motorcycle, barbecuing, and of course, spending time with his wife and his son. One thing people may not know about Travis is that his TV shows of choice are cooking shows and documentaries. Travis, I speak for our entire department when I say that we are excited for you tonight. We are lucky to have you, and you're a great fit here. Congratulations.
Madam Mayor and the council and all family and friends here, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm excited to take this next step in my career. This is where I started. This is the exact department and city I always wanted to end up in, nice, small, tight-knit communities. I started I had my first interview here in January of 2020, and after that, everything kind of shut down, and I'm glad both the city and I kind of held our patience and fought through that fun time to get me started here in September of 2020, and it's just been rolling ever since. I started my relationship with my wife while I worked here, got married while I was working here, had my first son. We're closing on our first house tomorrow, so it's I feel like my whole life has kind of blossomed while I've been at this department, so thanks everyone for coming tonight.
Well, Travis, on behalf of myself and the entire city council and our entire community, welcome. You've been here for a few years, but welcome to your new role. And welcome to, as you know, an extended family, not only within the police department, but at City Hall as well. You're a welcome face we've gotten to know over the years. We talk about how lucky it is to work for a city like this. Well, we feel that we're very lucky to have you and your colleagues as well. The last few years have been so incredibly difficult for law enforcement in so many different regards. You don't have to worry about that here. You never will. So as long as this council is here and this staff is here, we will always support you, and we value everything that you bring to the table every single day. Stay safe. Enjoy your career. We're so glad that all of your firsts happened here. That is so amazing. Congratulations on your beautiful family, your new house, and we look forward to celebrating a lot more force with you throughout your career here. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess, and why don't you get together with your friends and family and your colleagues and take some pictures. We're in recess. There you go. Okay, we are back in session. So that was a fun little recess where friends and family were able to gather for some photos for our newly sworn officer. City Manager, do we have any remote comments as part of the public forum this evening?
Madam Mayor, we do not.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the new agenda items. Does anybody on the council have any new agenda items that they would like to discuss or bring up for a future meeting?
I just have one, Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to see if we could have a workshop to discuss the possibility and slash feasibility of looking at pay increases for our volunteer firefighters.
Okay. For WFD, all right.
And it would be for 2024 probably is what I would think, but I'd just love to have some discussion around that.
So, City Manager, would you like to talk about the process of how that typically works for pay increases
Yeah, happy
for city
to.
employees?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Iverson. So typically, we roll that into the budget process because if there are substantial increases, then we have to budget for it. But, you know, what we could start out by doing, and I think we did it a couple years ago, but, you know, we certainly, if there is a specific reason to do so, we could do an updated kind of, I'll call it a comp study, a compensation study, but it's really just going out for something like this that's pretty straightforward, looking at what other communities are doing in terms of hourly wages. So happy to do that, but typically it's absorbed in our budget process.
So when you talk about a compensation study, are you talking about just an informal one where we would have some member staff inquiring with different cities in terms of what the pay rate is?
Yep, and typically for like pay raises or anything like that, I go through our director and they'll make a recommendation, and I haven't talked to Chief Clappridge about that. So I'd probably want an opportunity to talk with him to see if there's any urgent kind of action that's needed. And if not, I'd let you know, and you can still decide whether you want to still have a workshop. But I'd like to get a little bit more information from him, give you an answer. And worst case scenario, we could just have it as a discussion as a part of the budget process, which starts in June or July. I'm happy to put information together for you if you want to have a workshop to talk about it too.
So what I'd have to ask before we dig in too deep into that, since it is typically part of the budget process, what is driving the conversation? Did someone come to you, or?
No, no one came to me. I think I asked, it could have been even just a year ago, what our hourly volunteers got. And I, at that time, thought it was low. And for some reason, I just have been thinking about it over the last month, and just continues to come up in my mind that what they do for the city is so valuable, but I thought what we pay them hourly is quite low. And I hear people say, well, they do it for the love, but they also do a very dangerous job. And so perhaps the workshop isn't the right thing, but if we wanted to take the time to look to see if we are comparable to other volunteer fire departments and come back and report on that, or are we 10% low, or are we 10% higher? I think having that data would make me feel better. Again, my first reaction was it seemed quite low. I was quite shocked.
I think if any other members of the council have any thoughts on a workshop versus letting it roll into the budget?
Having been on the fire department and being the recipient of these, I don't think we need a workshop on this. I think the process is handled adequately. I don't think anybody feels like they're being paid too low or too high based on, the fire departments around here. And I will tell you, in my own case, when I decided to apply, I didn't think there was any pay at all involved. I was actually quite surprised. I was doing it just I wanted to contribute. So I don't think we need a workshop for this. I
Okay.
support it.
I would say, Jeff, do you want to weigh in?
I think it would be good to have some more data.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, if that hasn't occurred in the past in terms of increases for the fire department, let's make sure we have a conversation with Chief Clappridge, that he's presenting that on behalf of the department. I'd like to see some of that data as well to see how we compare, but also for comparable departments. I know we still are structured slightly differently. We don't have duty crews, so it might be a little difficult, but let's have some of that data and make sure that if we do need to increase, I also don't want to have one major one where it's going to be a really painful one to have. Let's make sure we're incrementally getting to where we need to be if we're not already there.
Exactly, and part of their compensation, just because it is unique, is built around the pension and all that sort of thing. So when I can come back, I can work with the chief to have him put together a memo to the council with that data, and then certainly the council can, if we want to make that a point as far as the budget process goes, or set up a special meeting, we can do that too.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think just seeing that information
Absolutely.
will just I'll be a lot more informed.
Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else have any items for further discussion at a later meeting? Okay. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. This evening, we have a number of items. Go ahead and read through those. We have the approval of the city council workshop and regular meeting minutes of February 21, 2023. We have approval of the check register. We have approval of municipal licenses. We have authorization to solicit bids for the 2023 mill and overlay project. We have approval of first reading of ordinance 822 city code amendments related to solar energy systems. We have adoption of resolution 14-2023, adopting a policy on use of public funds to reimburse permitting fees associated with affordable housing projects. We have adoption of resolution 15-2023, approving reimbursement of permitting fees associated with maintenance and improvement of affordable housing at Maggie Manor 2. And we have adoption of resolution 19-2023, accepting a donation from the Wayzata Lions Club. Are there any items that the council would like to pull for further discussion or have any questions about any of the items on the consent agenda?
No.
No? All right. Then would someone care to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Alex. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Molly. The motion's been first and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. We'll move on to new business. First item under new business is to consider approval of second reading and adoption of ordinance number 824, authorizing the issuance of general obligation temporary tax increment bonds for Panaway on Wayzata Bay. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you might be wondering why this is on the agenda, not the consent agenda, but this item was presented at the February 21st meeting for the first reading that was approved by the council 4-0. This is a unique item where in order to issue bonds, to issue debt, the city's charter says that the vote for that needs to be a strong majority. So that means it needs to be at least 4 council members that vote in favor of. So as a result, this item is under new business because we do need to do a roll call vote for it. Because the entire council wasn't here at the past meeting, I do have by and large, the same presentation from before. I'm not going to go through it in full, but I'll just give the highlights, and if there's any additional questions that the council has, I'm happy to answer them. So just briefly, we've been working on the design and engagement of Phase 2, which is the boardwalk and docks, as well as, oh, it does that again. Do you mind switching, Emily, where, so it doesn't automatically go? Sorry, we're going to get the technical difficulties out of the way for a second, so it doesn't just automatically go to the next one. Wow, that was easy, thank you. So we've been working over the past year on design and engagement for the section foreman's house and the boardwalk and docks. That's Phase 2A is the boardwalk and docks. Phase 2B is section foreman's house. Both of those processes, the engagement design, are complete. Now, because we are funded, or we have a funding plan for the boardwalk and docks, we are recommending moving forward yet this year. We have paused on the section foreman's house because the estimated cost of around $1 million or so. We do not have that raised, so that's why that's pausing. We do have the boardwalk and docks raised or a funding plan, so that's why we're moving forward with that. You can see how that timeline relates to the larger context of the project. Not going to go into the details of the history, but we've been at this for a long time, and we've gotten a lot of help from the state, and that'll show on this next slide shortly. But as you can see there, really since December, we've been working on a funding plan that utilizes the use of temporary TIF bonds. There's a lot of other funding requests and funding sources still pending right now. But as you'll see from the plan, it does make sense to move forward with these temporary bonds to kind of serve as a bridge loan. Because if we don't use them now, we're going to lose them. And that's one of the main key points of this. They're restricted, highly restricted funds that if we're not using them by June, we won't have the ability, and therefore our project kind of delta with how much funding we have would increase. So the funding plan is shown on that slide there. You can see if you go all the way down, you can see we really have kind of 4 alternatives depending on how the costs come out. We're currently bidding for the second work scope right now, so we should have a much better determination of where we're at with how much what the costs are. But depending on the alternates that we have, and there's 2 big ones. One is using galvanized steel versus stainless steel. The other one is not moving forward with a portion of the docks by the depot and leaving that for a later phase. There's 2, so you combine those 2 alternates together, and you really have 4 kind of possibilities. And those are at the bottom portion, the very last 2 rows of this spreadsheet. The numbers that are to the 2 columns to the right are if they're in parentheses, that means we're short on the overall projected budget, and if they're not in parentheses, that means we have excess revenue. So you can see we're generally on track. There's, depending on the alternates, we could be a little bit over budget, or we could be a little bit under budget. And that's kind of how we were kind of seeing how it would go. So it's moving forward as generally projected. The area, let's see if I can use this correctly. There we go. The area, the second to the last bank of numbers, you can see here, those are costs. I'm sorry, those are sources. Can you see that? No. Is it showing up?
Are you using the laser pointer?
Yes. It's not showing on your screen.
Us.
Okay, so the sources though are on the second to the last bank of numbers. You can see that as tax increment bonds. That's $6 million. That's what we're contemplating tonight in the second reading. That's a major funding source for the estimated cost of the project. The other sources highlighted there are $500,000 in Conservancy donation revenue. That's where we think right now, that's what they have available to us or will have available to us. We also have a couple $100,000 in lake effect reserves. That's from being under budget for phase 1. And the last source is the State of Minnesota bonding bill, which we have received award, and we're just going through the reimbursement process now. So that totals almost $11 million, which is about the total of the overall project cost. But the point of this is showing that a major component of that is the TIF bonds. What you see here is the actual TIF 6 district and where those bond dollars are coming out of. You can see the last number down below is the remaining cash reserves. So we feel that this is a reasonable plan and adequate funding for that TIF bond. And I'm happy to walk through that if there's any questions about that. But I thought it was important to show the context of where it's coming out of in the TIF 6 district. This doesn't, all the numbers that I showed you in terms of the sources, the approximate $11 million of sources, that does not include any of the pending requests that we have out there. You can see that on your slide there. We have a sales tax exemption request for materials that we have for part of the project that we've already built and then for the future. And we have a big additional bonding request that we've made a lot of traction with at the Capitol. And then we know that there's going to be more conservancy dollars as well contributed towards the project. And then an LCCMR grant that we've already received acknowledgement on. So however this number shapes out, $10 million, up to $10 million, we're going to get a good portion of it. We just don't know exactly what the amount will be. But because we lose the ability to use TIF bonds by June, we need to issue debt now in order to move forward with the project. So that's what the council considered 2 weeks ago, and that's what the recommendation is tonight to move forward. You can see just a couple key points. These are temporary. Once we know the exact project amount in terms of the cost, and then how much revenue we get, we'll update the bonding request, or refinance it essentially, and it will likely be a much lower amount. I mentioned about the voting requirement. Because this is TIF debt, and that has to go through the HRA, they'll have to issue a pledge for that for these bonds in March. Overall, staff does recommend moving forward with the second reading, and it's essentially based on this. The rationale for the project is based on this being the strategic priority, or one of several strategic priorities of the community for the last decade, of really just enhancing our most treasured asset, which is Lake Minnetonka. The boardwalk is the crown jewel of this project, and issuing bonds now will give the city the most flexibility in using TIF, so it stays within the community rather than losing it to ultimately the county and the state and other entities. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Questions of staff? Yes, Jeff.
The $6 million, that will be paid with something like 20% of the tax revenue that comes off those TIF 6 buildings. So none of this is going to hit our general fund or our tax levy, right?
Correct. So the $6 million will be paid paid by increment that's generated from TIF 6. There's a lot of other obligations to TIF 6 as well, other city projects, other private development projects. This is incorporated into that list of obligations. But as you saw, even with all those other obligations, because the district is performing so well, and this is very conservative, this doesn't assume any other development that would produce more increment. Even with those conservative estimates, you see there's still a remaining cash balance of over $500,000 at the end of the term.
Okay.
So that means that, yes, the district is reimbursing and paying for this bond without any impact to the general fund.
That's my biggest question.
So another way to state this is a bridge loan.
Yep.
Until our increment comes in from that TIF district.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we get a little bit more determination on how much of it we really need to utilize.
Right.
Because we don't have the total costs and uses and sources worked out yet.
Perfect, thank you.
And said another way, if the contractors and material suppliers were to accept taking TIF funds as they came in as payment, then we wouldn't even need this, right? But they need to be paid up front as they're doing the work, rather than just wait for these payments, which is why we're doing the bridge loan now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Kathy?
May I ask a couple of questions?
Oh, of course.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Jeff, since I wasn't here. And the minutes from the last meeting were very helpful to read, so that did bring me up to speed on quite a bit. I just have a couple of questions that you and I did kind of talk about today. In one of the packets we got, probably about a month ago, in there was listed the interest rates that we would pay on these bonds, and if I'm correct, I think it was around $3 million. How are the interest rates paid?
Good question. They're incorporated into the overall annual debt service. But they're usually taken out, so you can see on that in front of you now, the interest on the bonds is a line item separately that the city will have to pay, $3.8 million over the course of a 25-year term.
And that is not to be paid by taxpayers? How is that paid?
That'll be paid by the increment generated from TIF 6.
Okay. And so, if I heard you correctly, that the increments from that particular TIF district won't come in until around 2030 something. Is that correct? And so the bridge loan, as it's being referred to, is to carry us until 2030 something when we actually start to receive those TIF dollars. Is that correct?
Councilmember Iverson, no, the bridge loan is really just to carry us through to when we have the final cost of the project, so what the ultimate cost is and what other sources we get.
So to provide for the cost of the construction?
Yes.
More or less to pay the contractors?
Yes.
Okay. So part of a concern, and you guys have heard this before, but I want to say it for the public, on page 108 in our thing from Dorsey, is that one of the things that we are hopeful as a city is that we get additional funding from the state. But there's no guarantee that we get that. And I personally feel that perhaps we're taking some of the bonds in hopes that we get that, and it's a risk. I'm not comfortable with that risk. I believe that when we started out many years ago, 10 plus probably, right? With this concept that I don't believe as a city we thought we'd be bonding this much money to construct it. So I'm still a bit concerned. So thank you for all the data and all the information. I still can't get behind it at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, any comments from the council? No?
Let me just clarify that.
Yes.
So if we take a bond for $6 million, we have 3.7, which also includes Panaway 1, over 25 years, the tax increments will cover all of that.
Correct.
So our taxpayers will never pay a cent.
Correct.
And if we don't do this, then we lose that money to the state or Hennepin County or something.
Goes back to be.
This is basically free money for us to use.
I would say we will lose millions of dollars if we don't utilize this increment that is would otherwise need to be used for highly restrictive sources. So if we don't utilize it through this mechanism, we don't have any other eligible expenses. So we would lose that money, which would be millions of dollars that would go back to the state. That's
We
correct.
have nothing else in the docket for the next 3 or 4 months, and then after June, we lose this income stream of $9.7 million.
We would lose $6 million, basically.
Plus the interest, though.
That we pay the interest.
Yeah, it'd be greater, but some of it would ultimately come back to us through the redistribution. But I think it's
Okay.
safe to say we'd lose the lion's share, if not all, of that $6 million.
Can I ask a question on that? I'm confused, Jeff.
Sure.
Because I thought we had $4 million secured. We secured a $4 million grant from the city, right?
From the
From the
state.
state.
Yeah,
So
that's
we've got $4 million, it's just some paperwork that needs to be filled out. I'll simplify that. But we still have a large gap that needs to be met.
Right.
And that large gap is what the bonding is that you're looking to get passed tonight, correct? So we wouldn't lose all of it. We would lose $4 million if we don't do something by June, because that's part of the contract that we have with the state of Minnesota. Is that correct?
Councilmember Iverson, I think Councilmember Parkhill was referring to using the ability to utilize increment in TIF District 6, which is $6 million, give or take, for the boardwalk and docks. If we don't move forward with that bonding now, because they're highly restricted funds, or it's a highly restricted source, that goes away. That ability to use the money for that purpose goes away.
So help me then, Jeff. Maybe the other thing I guess I'm confused on is, do we have $6 million already accumulated from TIF District 6?
No, it will accumulate over the course of about, I think, 22 years.
Okay, so that's that later date I was talking about. So we are bonding to get that money for the district that will have that money down the road.
Yeah, over the course of.
Okay,
yeah,
but it's not in the bank today.
No, it's not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you?
I think maybe the thing we're not reiterating to Councilmember Iverson is that we were given the special legislation from the state in order to use the TIF $6 for the boardwalk.
Yeah, sorry.
That's the use it or lose it.
I didn't point that out at the beginning. When I referred to the use it or lose it scenario, we were given special legislation, an exception to utilize TIF dollars for a park-related expense, specifically for the boardwalk and the docks. And so that's what makes this this unique. And in addition to that, for utilizing those types of expenditures within a TIF district, you have 5 years to do so. And starting in, June is kind of the 5-year deadline. So we can't utilize that anymore after June.
Okay, so thank you for saying docks as well, because I think the focus has been on the Panaway. And as you and I talked to today, I would be 100% behind funding the docks. But I think the boardwalk is an expensive luxury. Honestly, that's my opinion. It's a very expensive luxury for the city of Wayzata. And I hear both things. So everyone knows I'm not so anti. I have people that call me that are 100% behind it. And they're like, why are you so against it? And I have other people that just can't understand why we're looking to put such a $10 million, $12 million boardwalk that's less than 400 feet on our city. Concerned that the police officers can't see down there. That's going to add more revenue to hire more staff. It's just, it's a snowball in our city that perhaps is getting out of control. And that's my concern, is when is the spending going to stop? So,
Okay.
so thank you for clarifying that, Molly. I appreciate that.
All right. Any,
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm just going to clarify a couple things. One, I think the boardwalk total is going to be about 1,500 feet. And we'll continue to engage to ensure whether it's a video camera. We have a whole working group to make sure it operates effectively and it's safe. And but those are concerns that have been brought up, and we're gonna make sure it's safe.
wonderful, thank you. All right. If there are no further questions or comments from the council, would someone like to make a motion to approve the second reading and adopt ordinance number 824, authorizing the issuance of general obligation temporary tax increment bonds for Panaway on Wayzata Bay?
Madam Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Alex. And a second?
Second.
That motion is seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? All right, City Manager, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember McDonald,
Aye.
Councilmember Plekish,
Aye.
Councilmember Iverson,
Nay?
Councilmember Parkhill,
Aye.
Mayor Mouton.
Aye. Motion passes 4 to 1, pardon me. All right. Moving on to the next item under new business is to consider adoption of Resolution 11-2023 denying subdivision at 1030 Lake Street East. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Gellner is going to walk us through this action item.
Mayor, may I
Yes.
please have the mic for just a minute?
Yes, of course.
Is this a good, right time? Okay. I would actually like to recuse myself from this application.
Okay.
I have a property in the neighborhood that is on the market, and I don't want to be perceived as having a conflict of interest on this application, so I will remain silent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. So there will be no questions or discussion when the council.
Correct.
Okay. If I forget, please remind me. Just punch me in the arm. Very good. Excellent. Yes. Ms.
Okay.
Gellner, thank you.
Yes. 1030 Lake Street East is the applicant this evening, Black Dog Homes Edition. Owner and applicant is Black Dog Homes. The project is located near Lake Minnetonka in the southeast portion of the city. The property is zoned as R3A, single and two-family residential district, shown on the left-hand side of the screen. And the property is guided as low-density residential, and that includes 1 to 3 units an acre. And that's shown in yellow on the right-hand side of the screen, and that's in our 2040 comprehensive plan. Here's an aerial view of the property. Shows the existing home as well as the existing detached garage, located on Lake Street with BNSF Railroad in the rear yard of the property on the south side, a wetland on the western portion of the property, and Eastman Lane as well to the south. These are some street views from about 6 months ago, at least, at times when nicer times outside. And there were a lot more trees on the property in the past. I have some more information about the trees that have been removed up to this point. So the existing home was built in 1903. There's that detached garage on the site that's on the eastern portion there by that eastern property line. There's the wetland on the west side of the property. It's adjacent to BNSF Railway. The dimensions of this site are 1.12 acres, or just over 48,000 square feet. And there's 338 feet of frontage on Lake Street, which is quite unique. The applicant is requesting a major subdivision to divide one parcel into 3 parcels. They would demolish the current home and garage and build a new home on each of the parcels. There's a site plan showing those 3 lots with proposed building footprints that conform to the R3A setback requirements. So lot number 1 is to the west. This is the largest lot of the 3 at over 29,000 square feet. There is a wetland on the property that's over 15,000 square feet, as well as a 20-foot buffer between the wetland and any proposed development. It slopes 9 feet from east to west, so it slopes downward toward the wetland. There's a curb cut proposed to be located that would accommodate the speed bump that is located on Lake Street. And the home is proposed to be built and sold by Black Dog Homes. With lot number 2 that is in the center, that lot would be 9,544 square feet. The minimum lot size in R3A is 9,000 square feet. Would have 65 feet of frontage, and the minimum is 60 required for this zoning district. The site is graded to slope from north to south and then westward toward the wetland. The home is proposed to be custom built for a future owner, so the footprint here is preliminary, but shows what a conforming footprint on this property could look like. Now, the plans in the application do show that it's likely that a future owner may want to have impervious surface that's over our hardcover limit and would require city staff approval and require additional stormwater mitigation, and that's because it's located so close to Lake Minnetonka. With site number 3, it's a little bit similar to the lot number 2. It's 9,519 square feet proposed with that 65 feet of frontage. A new curb cut would be located there as well. The site would be graded to slope from north to south like the other one as well, and then westward towards the wetland. And then again, the home is proposed to be custom built, and so this footprint is again preliminary in nature, but shows the ability to build a home on this lot and has a similar impervious surface requirement. So overall, all the dimensions are compliant with our R3A district. Just note that there are different slopes of the driveways to note here for the different lots, but they meet our city standards. And the wetland and stormwater plan here is that we do have that buffer between the wetland and lot 1 and the lot 1's home. All the drainage is proposed to flow to the southern portion of each property and then west into the wetland. And no new stormwater mitigation is proposed for lot 1, but it is anticipated for lots 2 and 3 due to the anticipated amount of impervious surface that we would expect with new home plans. I understand that the colors may not be quite right on your screen. They're okay? Okay, lovely, because this next slide has lots of colors. All of the red dots are showing trees to be removed with this application. So most of those are going to be in the front yard. The yellow shows previously removed trees, and those are located a little bit more to the interior of the site. And then lastly, I have green dots representing the trees to be preserved on the site with this application. I have another map that I'd like to show you, and the label that shows the wording with a little red bubble is meant to show the trees that would be planted with this application. The applicant has offered to plant trees that are already 6 inches in diameter at the time of planting, which is above and beyond our code requirement of 3 inches. That is atypical to see that. Lot 1 conditions are in the greatest control of this applicant as they intend to develop the lot. Lots 2 and 3 may change over time. However, we would be able to work with the applicant in the development agreement to secure the tree plan for at least the 3 growing seasons. So I'll just restate that. Our development agreement process allows us to require the applicant to follow our tree preservation ordinance, and that would be in play for the 3 growing seasons that are required by our tree preservation ordinance. After 3 growing seasons, an owner could apply to make changes further to their lot, and we would work with them to comply with the tree ordinance at that time. Replanting would likely still be required at that time. So I thought it might be helpful to show you, I guess I left 1 red on the screen, but I thought it might be helpful to show you in green all those to be preserved, and then with the red unique labeling there, all to be planted. So overall, we do see trees lining the site and lining the surroundings of each of the homes. And so we feel that we're very near having the tree preservation ordinance nearly met, but there's some feedback from the commission that we'll share with you this evening as well. So the tree preservation, tree removal, and replacement was discussed pretty thoroughly with the Planning Commission. Our city forester reviewed the information and met with the applicant at least once to review how the site could be maximized for tree preservation. Of course, we're starting from a really unique position in which there are a lot of trees that were on the site for many, many years prior to this development application. So we've included all of those previous removals that occurred in the last 2 years. Those are all shown here on the table. Now, the significant tree inches that must be replaced at a ratio of 1 to 1, heritage trees replaced at a ratio of 2 to 1. Any dead or diseased or dying trees are excluded from the equation. And we do have a fee in lieu of planting program that can be offered when a site is maximized, meaning that the forester determines that the site is really at its maximum amount of planting, and then a fee in lieu can be accepted after that. So in this application, that has been the case, and so the applicant has offered to pay the required fee in lieu of planting payment of $75,520 for this application. I can come back to this table if there are any questions about the calculations. Our engineering staff found that the 3 parcels that are proposed here in the subdivision will be served by existing water and sanitary sewer mains on Lake Street East. There are no concerns there with the utility plan. Both systems have the adequate capacity to serve the 2 additional residences beyond the 1 that is there today. The wetland is a managed 3 wetland that requires that 20-foot buffer, and the applicant has shown that on their plans. All the curb cuts must comply with city standards, and Lot 1's curb cut does not conflict with the existing speed bump. And future stormwater mitigation, potentially on lots 2 and 3, is likely due to the footprints that we've seen proposed here today, and that would likely require city staff approval. And again, that's related to the city engineer's authority within our shoreline ordinance to approve impervious surface at that level. So the letter went out to neighbors within 500 feet in January. No neighborhood meeting was required. We received 2 public comments that are in your packet this evening. They stated concerns over the wetland, tree loss, and the number of proposed homes and street parking. 7 members of the public commented at the public hearing. There were similar concerns heard then. Most noted that the redevelopment was generally expected on this site due to the age of the home, but they were surprised to see it at this density, so the number of homes, 3 homes. And then 1 member of the public stated that they were in favor of the project. The Planning Commission discussed trees really heavily. There was concern about the number to be removed and already removed. And I think that there was some acknowledgement that the amount of trees planted on this, within this plan, work well for if 3 homes are to be proposed. But the commission began to question whether 3 homes was the appropriate amount for this particular property. We talked about the wetland. We discussed the feasibility of building that closely to a wetland. We also discussed the wetland buffer that is required, the 20-foot buffer. And then we discussed towards the end of the meeting whether the wetland was counted in the density calculation for this property. With the neighborhood, we heard comments from the commission about traffic flow on the narrow street with additional homes and turnarounds, a little bit of just congestion in that area due to the narrow streets. And then we also discussed at the commission that the comprehensive plan has different guidance on the north side of Lake Street as opposed to the south side of Lake Street where this property is located. And they drew a distinction between those 2 areas. And I have a couple maps to elaborate on that for you here. And the key difference is between 2 of our categories. And I'll go into this in detail in a minute here. So the outcome was that the commission voted 5-0 to recommend denial of this application and generally felt that 2 instead of 3 lots would be more appropriate for this site. Now, since the Planning Commission meeting, I thought it would be important, and I looked at this today after reviewing the minutes again and reviewing the video, that there was a discussion right at the end of the meeting about whether wetlands were included in the density calculation. It was a really good question. I'm glad the commission brought it up. We just assumed that wetlands would be included in the density calculation. So that's what you see in your staff report. That's what was presented to the Planning Commission. And so that calculation means that this property is compliant. It's 2.67 acres per acre. That's 3 homes on just over an acre. That would be compliant with our low-density residential calculation. So we didn't think much more of it. But when I reviewed this video again today, I thought, I should probably just double check this once again because it's a really good question. We don't see proposals on or near wetlands all that often in Wayzata. Actually, we don't have as many wetlands as you'd maybe think as a lake community. And so I thought I'd review it again. And what I found today is that we do have a code provision in section 91907. And it says that unless approved by a conditional use permit, areas qualifying as wetlands pursuant to this ordinance shall not be included in the calculation for total area. So I failed to mention this or find this in the code until today. So this is brand new information to you and to the applicant. And I thought it was important that I get it into public record and discuss it this evening. But without a CUP application, a wetland really should be excluded. And so that means the density calculation for this property is at 4.6 units an acre. And that's, and there's the numbers there at the bottom of the screen, and that means that it is too dense for that comprehensive plan guidance. So to summarize, the wetland is really important to the density calculation here. It's such a big portion of this property that it changes the math really significantly, whether we count it or not. From my reading of the code, we still have the ability with the applicant to work on a conditional use permit potentially. But, knowing the discussion that was had with Planning Commission, I think there's more to discuss there. I can come back to that too if you'd like to. I have a couple more slides that talk about the surrounding neighborhood and the density of the surrounding neighborhood. Perhaps I just move into that now.
I think so.
Okay. So low-density residential is the yellow on the screen. That's what this property is guided in our 2040 comprehensive plan. Now, so are the properties to the east, those 2 homes to the east as well. Now, in our comprehensive plan, it says that these properties should be 1 to 3 units an acre, and they're primarily single-family homes, and that the R2A and R2 zoning districts align with the densities of this category. It notes in our comp plan that the future low-density residential land uses they're scattered throughout the city, and they represent existing platted lots that are greater than 14,520 square feet. And that there is potential for subdivisions for redevelopment on these parcels. And so I just wanted to point out that the R2A and R2 zoning districts align best with this comp plan guidance, but that is not what this property is zoned. So it's an outstanding inconsistency that we have in our zoning code and comprehensive plan. We were not planning to address any potential rezonings on our map until we finished all of the code and text amendments that we've been planning as part of our multi-year zoning study. So we hadn't yet addressed this issue. It wasn't yet on our radar. It was planned for later in the year. So this property is really highlighting an issue that we have with some inconsistency there. Now, I mentioned those two lots that are to the east, that are south of Lake Street. I know this map's a little hard to read. It's an aerial map, of course, and it's got a lot of the same colors on it. The data source for these lot sizes is from Hennepin County parcel map, so there is a margin of error in this. It could be up to 1,000 square feet of margin of error. But I wanted to show you the general lot sizes that we're seeing to the east, and those are 14,000, roughly 14,000 and roughly 19,000 square feet. Just a reminder that we're seeing that the lot sizes to the west are proposed to be smaller than that.
Could you refresh my memory? We're talking about Lot 1 is proposed to be 29,600.
Yes, that's correct.
Lot 2, 9,500. And Lot 3, 9,500,
Yes, yep, approximately, yes. That's right.
give or take a few square feet. Okay.
And I have another map to show you as well of the neighborhood to the north, but I just wanted to raise this distinction here that this property is currently zoned R3A, and so the minimum is 9,000. So the applicant is correct that they have put together a proposal that complies with that R3A district. After reviewing this application and seeing this inconsistency in our comprehensive plan and considering the wetland, I can see why there may be interest from the council eventually in our zoning study to potentially rezone this property to either R2 or R2A, where the minimum lot size would be larger. Now, ideally, we'd have these things aligned and worked out before a developer is ready to make a subdivision application, but that's not where we're at with this current property. Now, the central core residential is the hatched area that's to the, a little connection issue here, I apologize. See if this works for us. Yep, okay. Now, the central core residential area is to the north. That is guided for 3 to 6 units an acre. Those are denser lots. They're closer together, smaller lots. There's the distinction there in our comprehensive plan. So I wanted to point that out to you, that our comprehensive plan notes that the lot sizes for this area are generally ranging from 7,000 to 14,000, generally single-family homes and duplexes. And then I have a map here, another aerial map showing some lot sizes. I know it was hard for me to fit all of the numbers on the screen. I tried to use some arrows to help you see, but generally you're seeing that the lots to the north are ranging from 8,000 and to 12,000, with one larger lot that's up at 17,000. And we can just kind of infer that the lots farther to the north are generally going to be about that size or slightly smaller. And there is some margin of error in this data from Hennepin County. These aren't pulled from certificates of survey, but it gives you a general idea that some of the lots are 8,000 and 9,000, but we're seeing this is also guided for a lower density as well than this property, subject property tonight. Happy to come back to this data as well. This was not in your packets. This is work that I did as I prepared for this evening. So I'm happy to sit on this for a minute, or I can come back to it. I would say just lastly, the kind of general theme that I see here is that the lots south of Lake Street in this area are larger, and they are guided to be larger than those to the north. I think the issue here is that it's zoned R3A currently, but there's some room to discuss whether it should actually be a different zoning district. So one more update for you before I conclude. The applicant submitted a letter that's in your packet that also includes a supplemental tree plan. We discouraged all applicants from submitting additional materials before the city council meeting, but the applicant felt it was important that they submit this to you. They've submitted a supplemental tree plan. Our forester has reviewed it, at least preliminarily, to give you some idea of what his thoughts are. He didn't feel that it was all that feasible to save many more trees as proposed. He would like to get more information ultimately to decide if that's possible. Some of the trees here can't be saved due to being ash trees, emerald ash borer. One tree was actually already removed. A couple others
You
are
lost
either already
the,
removed or dead.
Sorry.
Sorry, there
No,
connection
it's
issues here.
a finicky connection.
It is. Yes, okay. And in essence, the summary here is that there's possibility that they could save a couple more trees, but I don't know that it's going to make a significant impact on the overall presentation of the development application. So I think I'm going to switch computers here quick. Okay. I think it's mostly just this laptop is getting a little old on us. So I only have one or two more slides for you this evening, so we'll try to get through this here. Thanks for your patience. Okay,
Good to show up there.
okay.
Take that one.
Okay.
A question, Ms. Gellner, while you're working on that. The letter that was submitted between the Planning Commission and the last time we were supposed to meet, but with weather and everything else, and the necessity to be able, because of the holiday, to be able to review that letter. Did staff and the city attorney have an opportunity to review it? And are there changes to it? Could we talk a little bit more about that letter? Because I didn't go through it bullet point by bullet point to see what has changed from the time between going to council or planning commission to council.
Yes, I'll give a brief summary, and I think, City Attorney, if you'd like to support me on this answer, I'd appreciate it. My interpretation of the letter is that the applicant feels that they've complied with all of the standards of the subdivision ordinance and of the R3A district, and they've submitted a tree plan that attempts to maximize the tree preservation on the site under their plan. And so they're requesting approval of their subdivision application.
Okay.
If there's any further detail there's some legal arguments that are included in there as well.
But that's a deviation, that plan is different than what the planning commission saw, is.
It is different, yes. And that's why we generally discourage our applicants from submitting new plans between commission and council. I would say that it's not, the changes are, it's a few, we're talking about 10 trees difference. So it's not a wholesale change.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I would just add that the plats are not different. I think the tree plan is different. So you're looking at the same preliminary plat as the Planning Commission reviewed and made findings on. Now, some of those findings did go to trees, several of them did, and so the plan that was submitted would be different, but I think the analysis of our forester was that it was not materially different, or a lot of that plan
Okay.
wasn't feasible.
Okay, great, thank you. Do you just want to talk through the last couple slides?
Well, it turns out I just have one, and it's the proposed motion to adopt the resolution.
We got that,
So
all right.
I think, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Before we go to the applicant, does council have any questions of Ms. Gellner?
I do.
Yes. Jeff?
Okay, so you're saying that the comp plan is guiding the north of Lake Street different from the south of Lake Street?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and less density south of Lake Street?
That's correct.
Okay. And what is that density? 1 to 3?
1 to 3 units an acre.
Okay. Regarding the emerald ash borer, how many trees on this property are ash trees that have the risk of being, do we know? I know it sounded like 5 of the 10 that they were trying to save probably wouldn't last that long anyway. Is that what I should take that to read?
I would say that that's true for the 10 they were hoping to save in that supplemental plan that you saw. Several of those were ash. I'd have to look at that big table of all the tree species and count them up, honestly. I don't
That's
have
the
that in front
downside
of
of getting
me.
the paper copy. You can't read it.
Yeah, it's really
I should have pulled it
detailed. So I'm not absolutely sure. I can say, though, that we generally exclude ash trees from our calculations overall. They're just kind of considered a wash, because if they're dead, diseased, or dying, or they're, ash and will eventually be diseased, they're just,
That was my next question. So none of the calculations of what they were going to, they weren't going to have to replace any ash trees?
that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we have some sort of the wetlands have a 20-foot buffer, and there was some discussion about that wetlands area gets very big at times. We've had some drier years. Is it safe to assume that the 20 feet is enough and we're not going to flood that house that's there? And
Yes, so our city engineer and our city staff rely on a wetland delineation. That's a very official calculation of the size of the wetland. And so we do rely on that wetland delineation, and that has been performed for this property, and we rely on that science. Then the buffer is 20 feet, and that's also designed by codes that I'm not as familiar with. So, our city engineer doesn't have concern with the size of the wetland or the buffer. He feels it to be an accurate depiction of the existing conditions.
okay, and it seems interesting that they only have to replace trees with 3-inch diameter trees, but they're replacing them with significant trees.
Yes,
And that's not typical, right?
that is not typical. They are planning to plant larger trees from the get-go in an attempt to, preserve the site more.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, Alex?
Yeah, I've got a couple here. The depiction of the size of lots was very helpful, but I think there's more to it than that. So I'm curious, do you happen to know what the frontage is, the proposed frontage of the 3 lots, particularly the 2 lots that are further east, that are narrower? What are their proposed frontages, and how do they compare to the 2 homes directly to the east from there?
Great question. Let's take a look at that. Now, I'm going to use Hennepin County property maps for this again, so there's a little margin of error, but it'll give us a pretty good idea. All right, so I'm going to start with the lot that's directly to the east. Let's start with that one. The lot width of that is roughly 100 feet, 104 feet. And that's the lot that's labeled here on the map as 14,642 square feet. It's the house directly east of this proposal.
Okay.
That one is about 100 feet wide. And then I'll go another one to the east, and this would be the end of the block. That's also about 100 to 107 feet wide.
Okay.
So it is
And-
significantly wider than the proposed.
Which was
lot.
kind of my point. And the proposed plats, I understand these houses haven't yet been built, but in the proposed plats, what is the distance between the buildings? It looks to me like it's about 20 feet.
Yeah.
And how does that compare to the distances between these homes and the next 2 homes to the east? What are the distances between homes for those other 2 homes?
So yes, you're right about the proposal. We're likely to see, because the setback requirements are only 10 feet on each side.
Right.
The applicant will likely max that out, and so it'd be 20 feet between the homes. Now, that property to the east is very built out. Now, this is the property that's directly to the east of the proposal. I would have to assume from the aerial photograph that we're looking at 10-foot setbacks there as well on the sides. The far east property that's located at the end of the block, that one has a much larger side yard setback, though. That one's going to be more like a 25-foot, 30-foot setback on the west side. So I would say that the lot that's directly east is really built out, and the one farther to the east is less built out, and there's larger setbacks.
My question, though, was what would be the distance between these buildings? So the distance between the new developments, furthest east building versus the existing house to its east, and then versus the house after that. What are the distances there? Can you say that?
Yeah, so the distance between the proposed house on Lot 3 and the house to the east would probably be about 20 feet in between those. And then the distance between that house to the east and the next house to the east, that distance is about 40 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Molly?
Thank you. So I just would love a little bit more context of how, if anyone recalls during our 2040 comp plan research and creating that document of how we, to me, it would look like it would be something that you would really think about to make that one the low density, since it's on the other side of the railroad tracks. The entry to the front yard is on a completely different side. And I was wondering if anyone had any context to why that was not rolled into the neighborhood.
I think that from my research, the reason for that was because of the existing lot size. So I think this is the best image to show. Let me go back one. It's being a little finicky for me. There we go. So most of these properties in this area were already low-density residential in our earlier comp plan. And we made an effort to re-guide all those central core residential properties into a new category called central core residential. And it was meant to reflect the existing platted lots that were of that smaller size. And the intention there was to leave this property and those other two to the east down there as low density because of their large size.
Okay, so you didn't want to inadvertently encourage something or
I think,
keep it existing.
yeah, I think that there was some thought that was made during the comp plan that the existing lot sizes should stay relatively similar to what they are today. And there was acknowledgement that low-density parcels like this one, the yellow ones, could possibly subdivide in the future. So I think that the fact that we're seeing at least a two-lot split at minimum isn't surprising.
Understood. Then my other question is a little bit of a two-parter. One, I'd like to understand more about the actual road that's in front of the lot. There was a lot of discussion in the Planning Commission review and meeting about the width. A lot of concern from the neighborhood that way. And I'm wondering if you could give me some context of if that newer road is like a best practice width, or if it is a skinnier, more narrow road than typical. If it just feels that way because it's an interesting
Yeah,
to
it's
get in and out.
It's a great question. I so wish Mike Kelly was here for this one. It's about 32 feet wide. So I know that what I know more about is parking lots instead of roadways. And parking lot drive aisles tend to be 24 feet wide just to get two cars through. So this fits two cars driving with each other, but only one car parked.
Okay.
So as soon as you park two cars, only one car can get through. This is more typical of Minneapolis, St. Paul, not as typical of all of our Wayzata streets. I don't have measurements quick of other streets, but I think we anecdotally know that it's definitely smaller. And just when I was out there today, just with the amount of snow, a lot of people are having to park kind of partially up on the snowbank just to get out of the way. When people have work done in their homes, there's people queuing in the streets. It's pretty congested there.
It's tight.
I tend to maybe not think, though, from the public comments that we received that means that homes shouldn't be built here, though. I don't know if I was quite getting to that conclusion. I think it's congested, but I don't know if that's quite reason enough to not approve a plat.
I did ask the city engineer about that street prior to his injury, and that was the temperature he gave me as well. So, and then the other one is kind of where the two-part question comes in, which is about the speed bump. It feels like they're putting the driveway on the counterintuitive side of it, I would think. So if you're coming on my driveway, you're scooting out of town, you have to go over that. So the reason why it's a two-parter is because there's also significant trees coming down, or a lot of trees coming down where that driveway is. And I'm wondering if there was any consideration to putting the driveway on the other side of the speed bump, and then even The second part of the question is if the applicant is aware of or using any of our new tree preservation ordinance where we say they're incentivized to change up their building plans in order to preserve trees, then it helps the replanting ratio. Has that been talked about?
No, I don't believe it has. I think that I'd really like to talk to the city engineer more about the speed bump and if it's really like helping in that area. But I mean, maybe it is. It's such a narrow street. I wonder if people are already naturally slowing down. But yeah, I think that I can understand why you suggest that the driveway may be located on the east side of the speed bump instead, since in theory, the speed bump's there because people are coming off of Lake Street, right? And they're going pretty fast.
It was also intended to be a partial deterrent for cut-through traffic, and so we had a number of residents who signed a petition. Excuse me, sorry, thank you. We had a number of residents who were complaining about the cut-through traffic. Its location, I think it's, when I say scientific, that's up to the city engineer to state, but there are some general best practices in terms of how far it needs to be after the turn and so on and so forth and before the next turn. So I don't know how much latitude there is, and I'm certainly not the expert in that realm, but if memory serves me correctly, the city engineer, they're pretty precise about where they put it based on turns and things of that nature. Was there a feedback with regard to driveway location and the speed bump?
Yes, it's just the engineer said that it can't interfere, and they found that when it was redesigned in the plans that you see, that it was met standards and it was
Okay.
acceptable.
Well, maybe it's a better question for the applicant, but I just was a little thrown as to why the driveway would have been on that side of the speed bump. And
I imagine it may have to do with the home design, so I'm curious as well.
and then they didn't ask anything or bring anything about our new tree preservation ordinance where there's.
Well, I mean, they definitely met with our forester about the tree preservation ordinance more than once to try to maximize the plantings on the site and put together the most feasible plan possible. So that I know.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Kathy, any question? Oh, sorry. No, you owe me a punch in the arm. All right. So Councilmember Plekish asked a good question on the amount of frontage on the two properties to the east. I'm having a hard time seeing, even with my glasses, the frontage for the proposed sites. And is it me, or are these mics like really sensitive today?
Yes, and kind of scratchy.
Exactly. Okay.
So the frontage, I believe I have some data about that earlier here and the frontage data, I believe it's 65 feet for the eastern two lots. I can tell you here quick.
So lots 2 and 3 are 65 feet of frontage compared
Yes.
to 100.
Let me verify
And
here.
what was the second one? 107?
Yes, that's correct.
The other,
Yep, 65 feet for the lot 2 and 3.
okay.
The frontage I don't see on here for lot 1. Of course, it's significant because it includes the wetland buffer and the wetland. And then the lots to the east are ranging from 100 to 107 feet in width, which is generally the requirement for our R2 districts.
And what's the requirement for, this is R3,
Correct. Yep, R3 is 60.
is 60. Okay, thank you. All right.
Is the length of the lot? Do we know? Front, back?
Yes, so the length of the lot, I know it's probably about 100 feet, but I can verify that.
147.
Oh, okay. Longer than I thought. I think where the requirement for this district is 100 feet, so they're well beyond the depth requirement that we have.
So my question is also surrounded around the CUP. So do they need a CUP? according to the code?
That's my
But there is no
interpretation
CUP.
today. Yeah, and that's new to the applicant. So that's my error in not seeing that piece of code. It's in our general performance requirements. I'd prefer it be in a zoning district so we don't miss it. But yes, that's something that I discovered today.
So even procedural question. City attorney turns his mic on. I love it. So hypothetically, if the council said, you know, we would like to go back to staff and with our findings for approval, if the council were okay with that, would that be sufficient, or would they need a CUP in addition to that? Meaning they're gonna have to go back through the process of going to the planning commission, back to council? Where do we stand with all of this?
Yes, good question, Madam Mayor. Assuming that staff's analysis is that a CUP would be needed for the plat as presented, the applicant would need to make a second request for that. That would require a public hearing before the planning commission. So even if you were to direct staff to come back with a new resolution with findings approving this plat, I'd recommend that one of the conditions be that they obtain the necessary CUP for that plat.
Okay. And conversely, if we accept the denial, the recommendation for denial by the planning commission,
That question becomes moot.
but could they go back, so would they be able to go back through the process after they alter their application in some form or fashion with the request for a CUP?
Meaning, could they resubmit the same plat that you just denied?
I mean, how
don't
can
think
we
they would
apply
want-
anything without a,
Yeah.
how could we even approve anything without a CUP anyway?
Well, I think,
I guess I'm
yeah.
kind of between a rock and a hard place here.
right. I think procedurally, you could concur with the findings of the planning commission in their report and recommendation in the draft resolution that's in your packet, adopt that, and the application would be denied. Then it would be up to the applicant where they would want to go from there.
Okay.
If you disagreed with the planning commission's recommendation and findings, you could direct staff to prepare that alternative resolution with new findings that would support approval. And I think as part of that, one of the conditions would be that CUP that is required by code.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite the applicant to come up, if you'd like.
I would, thank you.
Good evening. If you could please introduce yourself with your name and address, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Dan Vanderheiden. I'm a resident at 312 Hampton Street. So I am a neighbor of this neighborhood. My wife and I have lived there for 10 years. I'm also the owner of Black Dog Homes and have owned and operated that company for 18 years. I'm also the developer and the applicant of the subdivision at 1030 Lake Street. I want to start by thanking the mayor, the city council, the city staff, our neighbors that showed up and spoke their thoughts. We all have a role to play in this community, so I respect the process. And I also appreciate the review of this proposed subdivision application. With regard to the review of the facts, and this is what I want to emphasize, the review of the facts. It is our hope that the City Council will approve the subdivision application at 1030 Lake Street. The facts to keep in mind. A, the proposed lots are larger than the required minimum of 9,000 square feet. They also fit the low-density definition as outlined in the comprehensive plan. Point B, the lot width and area of the lots 2 and 3 fit the scale and the character of this neighborhood. Lots 2 and 3 are 65 feet wide and they're over 9,500 square feet. Within a 500-foot radius of the property, there are 8 houses, or 26%, that have a lot width equal to or less than 70 feet in width and have an average lot area of 8,998 square feet. The proposed lots exceed the minimum standards for lot area, width, and depth, and are consistent with the character and the scale of this neighborhood. As I mentioned, I live in this neighborhood. I bought a house with a lot that is 55 feet wide and a lot area of 6,243 feet. I love it. This is a cottage-style neighborhood. There's no denying it. Item C, Black Dog Homes is committed to preserving as many significant and heritage trees as possible. Of the 25 remaining trees, we proposed saving approximately 50% in the original submission. In the amended plan, we were able to update that and proposed saving approximately 84%. Tonight is the first time I've heard that all of a sudden the 11 trees that we're proposing to save in this amended plan are somehow garbage trees. That's amazing to me that that is coming out tonight. So just for the record. So we understand that the amended plan does not revise our application, but it does display our willingness moving forward to work with the city staff to save as many trees as possible. We ask that the city council allow Black Dog Homes to work directly with the city forester and the city staff during the permitting process of each new home being built to address tree preservation on the property. Item D, the wetland will be protected and has been formally delineated under the Wetland Conservation Act. The Wetland Delineation Report was submitted on November of 2021. Minnesota Wetland Conservation Act Notice of Decision was issued on 12/6/21 with the TEP Committee and the City of Wayzata unanimously approving the wetland as stated and reported in that report. The proposed spec home on Lot 1 will respect the wetland and the associated buffer and will not encroach in those areas. Also, Black Dog Homes is open to coordinating with the City Environment Committee and the city staff during construction to further clean this area up. Item E, traffic and safety was taken into consideration. Black Dog Homes conducted 2 Zoom meetings with Val Quarles as well as Mike Kelly to discuss this subdivision application. For safety reasons, a driveway in relation to the speed bump was asked to be moved, which was done. 2 additional homes with the proposed size driveways do not present a traffic or a safety risk to this neighborhood. Item F, Black Dog Homes has received 3 Dream Home designations from the Parade of Homes for projects in Wayzata. A 100-year-old renovation in 2018, 2 new builds, one in 2021 and one in 2022. All of these homes fit the character and the scale of their neighborhoods. We're asking the City Council approve the subdivision application at 1030 Lake Street, which will allow Black Dog Homes to create 3 beautiful homes that will fit the character and the scale of this neighborhood. Thank you for listening to me. I would now like to invite up our legal counsel, Jacob Steen from Larkin Hoffman, who submitted a letter to the City Council to say a few words. Thank you, Jacob, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderheiden. Mr. Steen, good evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jake Steen, and I represent Black Dog Homes. I'm going to keep my comments brief because you do have a copy of my letter, but I do want to touch on a few salient points. This application is for a code-compliant subdivision. It meets all of the requirements under the R3A district, and we're not asking for any variances or any special consideration. Now, what you heard is that, and what we just heard for the first time tonight, which is a little bit unusual to be told in a hearing that we have a new application based on the comp plan designation. But what we would continue to maintain is that the comp plan is irrelevant as long as we can continue to comply with the R3A district, because that is the mechanical piece of your policy. And that zoning code, as long as it complies and as long as we can comply, it is a code compliant subdivision request. Now, as Dan has indicated, in a little crackle here, as Dan has indicated, this application is consistent with the character of this neighborhood. And we understand that you're looking at some of the adjacent properties, but the findings require you to expand that view, not just look at those adjacent properties, but also look at the surrounding area and the neighborhood. And as he indicated, more than 25% of the lots within 500 feet are less than 70 feet in lot width. And those, on average, are under 9,000 square feet. So by no means are these lots 2 and 3 inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. Like Dan said, this is a very cottage neighborhood, and these are entirely consistent with those surrounding properties. And lastly, this application will preserve the natural resources. There's been a lot of talk about trees in the wetlands, but this will preserve more than 20,000 square feet of a delineated wetland, improving the water quality both on the property and in the lake. And it will also save more than 50% of the significant inherited trees on site. Now, we know that there will be some tree removal required, and that's allowed under the code. What the code doesn't prohibit tree removal, because that would render a property undevelopable, and that would be a regulatory taking. But what it requires us to do is try to preserve these trees. And if we can't preserve them, we have to replace them. And if we can't replace them, we have to pay a fee. And as staff indicated, we're going to try to do all 3 of those, including paying a fee of over $75,000 for those trees. And that money is going to be used to preserve trees off-site. And what you've also heard from Dan, we understand we didn't amend our application, but we did want to demonstrate that we will work and will continue to work on particularly lots 2 and 3 to minimize the impact. Those footprints won't be known until those projects come through. And we want to be able to continue to work with your forester to eliminate those impacts or mitigate them the best we can. So again, this application meets all of the requirements, all of the objective requirements under the R3A district. And for that reason, we'd ask that you reject the Planning Commission's recommendation and approve this code compliant application.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. I'm going to turn to the council momentarily to see if they have any questions for you, Mr. Vanderheiden. Does council have any questions of the applicant? No?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Alex?
Sorry.
No? Oh, sorry, I made you stand up for nothing.
That's okay. Thank you.
But I wanted an opportunity for them to ask any questions they would have. Perfect. All right. I will turn it back to the council for discussion. Who would like to begin?
I have a question for staff.
Yes.
How was the 4.6 units an acre calculated? Because I kind of did it in my head, and it seems like it's more like 4, but I don't know how that's calculated, if you don't use the wetlands.
If you don't use the wetlands, then the 3 units on 0.77 acres should be 4.6 units an acre. Are you getting different numbers?
Well, I'm
Yeah,
just
'cause I
thinking
could re-
0.77 is almost 0.75 divided by 3, that's 0.25. If you add another 0.25, that'd be 4 instead of 4.6. And then if I did 1.3 times, what was it? I got 3.9 something. I just didn't want it to look worse than it is.
I think you're right. I think it is closer to 4. It looks like if I run that number again here with 0.77 acres, I get 3.89, 3.9.
Yeah.
Actually,
that's
if I
what got
round up.
to. Yeah,
3.9 units an acre.
okay.
Thank you for
Thank you,
catching
Jeff.
that. I appreciate
And one other question. This shows the guidance for the comp plan, right? That's what we're seeing here.
That's correct.
Is the zoning north and south of, the current zoning north and south of Lake different?
No, it's not different.
It's the
Actually,
R3A.
yeah, let me show you a map just so that you have that in front of you too. Sorry, this thing is a little bit slow to move. Let me go back up. I just want to make sure you can see the image of that. And it's for the R3A district. It's locking up on me. I apologize. My computer's across the room, or I would do this a faster way. Maybe I'll have to just go over there. Okay, we're really close now. There we go. The left-hand side shows the zoning, and they are the same zoning district. So our best practice is that when we reach near the end of our zoning study, after we've made any text amendments, we would make any recommended map amendments as well, so that all of our zoning districts align with our comprehensive plan. And I think this would be one of several areas that we could potentially consider a zoning change to. Of course, the applicant's working under current zoning at this time. But the comp plan guidance is an important piece here, long-term.
How do we handle this CUP thing? Because that's kind of come at the last minute. It seems like we might not have gotten this far had that we'd known, you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's very unusual that we would find this kind of information, especially on the day of a council meeting. So I apologize for the confusion and definitely for the applicant for the late notice on this. I think that I'd probably look to the attorney at this point for some recommendations about how to proceed, knowing that this CUP came up today.
And Madam Mayor and council member, I mean, the city should always follow its code. And so if staff discovered this, whenever the discovery is made, that's what we need to do. So I think, like I said earlier, if council follows the recommendation of the Planning Commission and adopts the draft resolution in your packet, I don't think that matters all that much, because the application would be denied, that proposed subdivision would be denied. If, however, you want to go a different direction based on a different set of findings, again, I'd recommend you direct staff to prepare that resolution with those findings, and part of that would be the requirement to get that CUP, or somehow solve for that where they might not need it, but I don't know that that's possible without a different plat.
Okay. Got it, thank you.
Anybody else? Want to start discussion, questions, discussion? Okay, thanks, Molly. Oh, I'm sorry.
allowed
Yes,
to say
Mr. Vanderhood.
I didn't know if I'm allowed to do this procedurally.
Please, go right ahead.
So I mentioned this earlier, and I'm mentioning it now, that in my view, this is almost unpermissible, what is happening in this meeting. Some policy or item that has never been brought up, never, not once, not in the Planning Commission's section, not in the public hearing, and today it's suddenly become a front and center item. That's unbelievable. That's ill-prepared. And if it's an item that's hiding that far in the underside of policy in the city of Wayzata, why is it not made more public? And why are we having this conversation today about that particular item? So much so that it may impact, that you're insinuating that it ought to impact the decision-making of this council. That is unfair to them. And it's certainly unfair to the person that purchased this lot, in that case, me as the developer.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderheiden. I can certainly appreciate your feelings about this and the sensitivity with the timing. I can't speak to that about what occurred. What I can say is, I believe we have had situations in the past where at times things have passed and planning applications, and then 6 months, a year down the road, we realize, oh, there's one step in the process that got missed, and it comes back to council and we get it resolved. Before we go down the path of, I'd like to hear from the council in terms of where they feel the application currently stands, and see what we can do in terms of next steps based on the outcome of where the council is, the four of us. So Molly, would you like to, yes?
Madam Mayor, can I just mention, I just want
We'll
to
get to
relay.
you, Molly, I promise.
Sorry, Councilmember McDonald. Just two quick things. I think regardless if there's another process that we've determined that it's needed, given the circumstances, we can work with the applicant and staff to try to expedite as long as we continue to follow the code, if that's needed. I do want to just remind that, we try to work with developers on coming up with what we think is a best preferred, or is what's the pathway for them to follow. Ultimately, it's on them to make sure that they know the code, and we work together on a best path forward. So it looks like when we reviewed their development application, they didn't have that, and we did not catch that. So we do apologize.
No, absolutely. It's a balance, right? And at the end of the day, nobody's perfect, and sometimes things get missed. If we make an error, we will do what we can to correct that error, certainly, and work to ensure that, as you said, if it goes in a direction of approving the application, of expediting things, understanding the time and the money that's involved in any delays. So, but we're not quite there. We're going to wait and get some discussion from the council. So, Councilmember McDonald, what says you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
We'll try the third time.
Absolutely. And I'll keep this pretty brief, actually. I would like, so as I've looked at this, this application and reviewed the meetings prior, I do lean more towards going with our zoning code and looking at this as an R3. Couple of reasons. I live on a street where I have a 60-foot wide lot, so do my neighbors. The one on the other side, though, has an extra wide lot. They're next to a park. It feels great and fine and plenty wide. I also have always really admired your house on Walker Avenue, and I think that's a great example of what sort of high-end home and what sort of value you'll bring to this cute, cottagey, charming neighborhood. I also think cleaning up the wetland is going to be really great for the neighborhood as well. So that's kind of where I'm at. Okay. Application.
Excellent. Thank you, Molly. Jeff or Alex, who would care to go next?
I'm happy to
Okay.
go here. I've got some points and some that just came into my head in the last minute or so. First off, I would like to acknowledge Black Dog and the company that they've got. I know that you guys have a great reputation for quality and for ethical building, and that predates this packet. This is just something generally known to me, and I think the community, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Also, I want to say that there is righteous anger for things like this that should not have come in at the last minute. And City Manager, I tend to disagree with you just a little bit here. I think there is culpability on both sides. Okay, it's not that they should know, but the city should know, and it should come up in conversation before the day of. Okay, so I think that there is righteous anger there, and I accept that. So again, to some of my notes, I'd like to also point out that I value what the Planning Commission does and what they did in this case. I think they asked the right questions and came up with some great things that we read in our packet. So here's what it is to me. To me, in this neighborhood, the character of the homes immediately to the east on that side of the street are more salient than the ones across the street, because to me, that is the visual that this neighborhood carries. And to see two homes that are 65 feet wide, and granted they might be similar to homes across the street, but that to me is almost like a different neighborhood, even though it's a short little block. To me, looking at those homes at 107 feet, 100 feet, and then suddenly you get homes that are 65 feet. That is a joltingly different number to me. And also the distance between homes as put out here also it seems to me just too close. And putting 3 homes in here would have that effect on that neighborhood. The wetland is worth commenting on too. Again, I've been in and out of this neighborhood many times, so I know all about it there. To me, the wetland almost isn't even part of the neighborhood. It happens to be a feature, but it doesn't seem like it's part of a lot. It's just there. Granted, it is part of a lot, but it doesn't look like it's part of a lot. It's a wetland. And so you're really looking at 3 homes in what I think is more restrictive space. And again, it to me doesn't fit the nature of that neighborhood when you look to the south side of the street. But the real deal tonight is this new piece of information. That there would have needed to be a CUP to apply for a 3 subdivided lot. Bottom line for me, though, I think it was a moot point. Even though we should have known about this, to me it's a moot point because I think 3 houses on that lot is just too many, and it ought to be 2.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
Okay.
Jeff?
Yeah. I look at it a little bit different. I see a wide variety of homes in the neighborhood. I don't necessarily differentiate the north and the south, especially when it north and south of Lake Street, especially when it has the same zoning. And I see zoning as being something that is maybe the mechanics, the objective stuff that you can rely on when you're making a prudent investment to buy a piece of property. And the subjective stuff is a lot harder to make that decision with. I think the fact that you're putting it, one of the biggest objections by the Planning Commission were the trees, frankly. And I think you coming back in with 6-inch trees, larger trees, paying the fee, so maybe we can save more trees in our community with the emerald ash borer treatments. I think that is something it can be used for. I'm not 100% sure, but I see that $75,000 being something that can really benefit trees in our community. So anyway, I guess the CUP throws it for me a little bit. That was a little bit of a surprise, and I don't have a problem with the size of the lots. I think you can build beautiful homes on 65-foot wide lots with these nice big trees in there. I think the lots are long enough at 150 feet. I don't really know how to handle the CUP thing, but maybe that's something we can make as a contingency.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Well, I too would like to thank the Planning Commission. They had a lot of robust discussion when it came to this application, and all very good points. I'm just going to cut to the chase. The comp plan is an error, and so I can't rely on an error for the low density. And the 2 lots to the left, to me, don't constitute a neighborhood. They don't equate to a neighborhood. The houses to the north, certainly to me, constitute that neighborhood, the look, the feel. So I think it will be, 3 lots will be a big change, but it certainly seems in keeping with the surrounding properties. Those that are on the lakeside, that shouldn't even be, a consideration, and yet the comp plan was looking at them exactly the same way in terms of density. I do think that Black Dog Homes has a great reputation in town. 2 houses on Walker Avenue, and they're beautiful. Used to drive by them every day. One of them I do, right on the boulevard there. They are stunning. That aside, it could be the most stunning home. If it did not fit, it wouldn't fit. And I I appreciate the efforts with regard to additional tree preservation and the work that will be done with the pond and all of those considerations. So to me, I think we need to get that comp plan updated to be reflective of the appropriate zoning. It just seems terribly out of place. And the lots that are proposed are similar in size to the neighborhood directly adjacent and to the north. So for that reason, I'm very much in favor with the caveat that we save the trees that we can save, the trees that were removed previously. That is, that's unfortunate. Hate to see that happen, especially for a stand of such beautiful trees. The other caveat is that regardless of who should have caught what and when, whatever we can do to minimize the time and expense, so if we have the ability to minimize the CUP expenses or whatever that takes for the applicant and to turn that around as soon as possible, and have a public hearing for that so that we can get that through. What is the soonest we could possibly get them on the Planning Commission schedule?
I think we could have them on the Planning Commission in April. I'd need to confirm a date in April.
Okay. Right. So potentially if we could get you on the Planning Commission schedule in April, and then it would come back through us for the CUP?
Yes, and that would come in May then. To you in May.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Madam Mayor, Council, if I may, if the council determines that you would approve this, which we would support with a condition, we would ask that that condition be contingent on having an opportunity to vet this determination. We haven't had an opportunity to understand this. There may be room for disagreement and maybe room for an interpretation that would be consistent with avoiding a CUP. So to the extent that you can have a condition that's open-ended to allow us to at least work through this issue with staff further.
Let me turn to my counsel. Counsel, what do you say about that? I mean, not going to come up with any legalese on the fly, but if we could say, if the attorneys could review and make a determination on, have those discussions?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I think we can talk about that. If council decides that it wants to entertain a motion to direct staff to prepare an
Findings
alternative,
of
yeah,
approval?
I think that's, we can look at that.
Okay. Would that suffice?
Yeah, presumably that the action, and maybe this is a question for David, it would be to direct staff to prepare findings. That would come back in a couple of weeks. We would have time during this time to evaluate that determination and better understand whether or not we think that's appropriate.
Yes, Madam Mayor and council, council will not be able to make a determination to go in a different direction than Planning Commission tonight. So there will be another council meeting where they would adopt that resolution and any
In a
condition.
couple weeks?
Yep, yep.
Okay. I think that's what you were saying, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it sounds like we need to direct staff via motion to prepare,
Madam Mayor, would you like me to maybe
Yes,
float
please.
something for a question that you could pose to the council? I think you could ask for a motion to direct staff to prepare a new resolution approving the proposed subdivision in the application with findings supporting such approval as have been discussed by council and with a condition of a CUP if necessary for consideration at your next council meeting.
did you come up with that on the fly?
Sort of.
Very well done. Okay. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? First and second, and any further discussion?
I'm not exactly sure what I'm voting on at the moment.
So we're voting to have, please correct
Could you
me if I'm
restate
wrong.
it for me, please?
Oh, boy.
Sure,
We're
Madam
gonna-
Mayor and Council. So the motion that's been made and seconded would be to direct staff to come back with a new resolution that would approve this subdivision. And you would consider that at your next meeting. And it would be based on the findings that have been discussed here tonight. And it would also potentially include that condition of a CUP if we determine that that's needed.
So a vote in favor of that at the moment doesn't mean that you're voting in favor of the plan.
Correct. You're not approving anything. This is directing staff to come up. Because right now, in the packet, all the findings that have been made are going the other direction. So we want to make sure that this applicant has a solid, legally solid resolution that would approve their application. So that's why we're recommending that council direction.
Okay. And with the condition of, we'll be moving as quickly as possible. Okay. So it's first and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion passes. We'll see you in a couple weeks. All right. Yes, we are going to take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at 9:21.
That's 9:21 on the city clock.
It'll be 9:21 on the city clock.
What a little
We are still under new business, and our next item for consideration is adoption of Resolution 10-2023, approving a development application for Contissimo Senior Living and approval of first reading of Ordinance 823, amending the official zoning map at 1405 Holdridge Terrace and 15419 and 15429 Wayzata Boulevard East. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Gellner is going to walk us through this item.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The owner of the property is Carecliff LLC, and the applicant is Pillar/Senior Lifestyle Living LLC, represented by Casey Shermack, who's in the audience this evening. The property is zoned as R2 medium-density single-family residential, and the property is guided as low-density residential in the comprehensive plan. However, during the PUD concept plan stage, the property was contingently re-guided as institutional public, and that was contingent on this planning approval that you have before you this evening. I have an aerial photograph here of the properties. And here's a photo from summertime. It's on the frontage road of Highway 12. It's a 2.5 acre site that totals 3 parcels now. It's relatively flat and it's heavily wooded. There's a wetland to the east and south, and that buffers the buildable area from the neighborhood. There's a city lift station that's located towards the center of the property, and there's single-family homes to the south and the west. The PUD concept plan application was reviewed in 2022, and it was approved in February of 2022. It's a 40-unit L-shaped memory care facility on the north and center part of the site. It's 40 single occupancy units for 40 beds, and it's 2 stories with a walkout level to the rear. And then at the time, future requests were outlined, but they weren't yet confirmed until this process here. Here's the renderings that were seen during the concept plan. It includes a shingle and lap brackets, cupolas, shutter and stone, so it gives that Lake Minnetonka-like residential feel. The applicant's requesting PUD general plan for the 40-unit senior living facility, subdivision to combine the 3 lots into one, a variance for the minimum unit size of 440 square feet, a rezoning to the PUD zoning district, and 10 design deviations. Here's some images of the proposed project. Since the concept plan, the applicant has proposed moving the city lift station farther to the west, adjusting the height of some of the elements to avoid needing a height variance, and improving the treatment of the rear facade. And that was from council's feedback at the time. Here's the site plan, shows the building in red, the parking lot in green, and then the city's lift station relocated. The building would be accessed from the parking lot, and the farther westernmost parcel that's along Holdridge Terrace would be proposed as open space with some walking trails, and the stormwater pond would be proposed on the south side of the building as well. There is some tree removal. The tree removal plan identifies a large portion of the existing trees were actually dead, damaged, or diseased. They are mostly ash trees already infested. The applicant still has a deficit within their tree calculations, but they have at least shown our forester a plan that does comply. So what I would intend to do with the applicant if we move forward in this process is that the plan set that would be part of the development agreement would include a compliant plan with our tree and landscape ordinance. And our applicant can speak to how he can become compliant as well. So after the neighborhood meeting, the applicant was open to additional plantings because he heard that at the neighborhood meeting. And so he's revised his plan set, and the forester's taken a preliminary look, and we would loop that into the development agreement process. And here's the tree plantings shown on the site generally around the perimeter. We do a buffer averaging for wetlands in this location, and that's 30 feet. The proposed wetland buffer will range from as small as 12 feet to up to 50 feet in some locations, but as long as we have that average of 30, that complies, and the city engineer is comfortable with this plan. The subdivision for the lot combination is to combine the 3 parcels and then update all of the easements on the property. It'll show also what's pretty special about this property is it will include a conservation easement for the southeastern portion of the property. And I think the applicant could speak to the benefits of a conservation easement a bit more as well. We would rezone this property to the PUD district. And the variance for unit size, and now we have a minimum unit size of 440 square feet, and that's more assuming a more traditional apartment with its own kitchen. Of course, these are memory care facility units. They do not have a kitchen. They have a bedroom, closet, sink, and shower. And there's a commercial kitchen, of course, and dining room facilities. We have a range of unit sizes here that are shown on the screen. Out of the 40 units, 9 are above 440, 17 are between 400 and 440 square feet, and then 14 are under 400 square feet. There's 10 design deviations. Don't worry, I will not go through all 10. I will point you to the right-hand side of the screen. The important thing about design deviations is they need to advance specific policies in our comprehensive plan. They need to permit greater conformity with other code standards or contribute to the positive effect in the area or alleviate some kind of undue burden. The Planning Commission found that all of these criteria were met for these design deviations, and the applicant worked really thoroughly to reduce the amount as much as possible. But with a senior living facility in this unique location, it didn't always make sense to follow the kinds of design guidelines that you'd see farther into the interior of the city for a general occupancy residential building. The engineering team found that the existing water main from Holdridge Terrace would serve the proposed building. The water supply was sufficient with capacity and pressure. The sanitary sewer service is proposed to discharge into the existing gravity main that has sufficient capacity. The owner needs to do a stormwater facilities maintenance agreement with the city. It's pretty standard. It would address the future maintenance of the underground stormwater and stormwater detention basin. There was a neighborhood meeting on January 17th. There were 5 people in attendance. They discussed the overall design of the building and the landscaping. They did request more trees at the time, and so the applicant has a response to that request that he can share during his presentation. There was a discussion of the nature area as well and just how it would be used. Generally, the thought is that the nature area would be generally open to the public, although I think we predict that members of the public would likely not use it if they live far away. It'd be something that neighbors maybe enjoy. What we have for you this evening with the applicant's materials is just showing a nature path that's kept in the same condition that you see at Big Woods. So it's just a natural path. It's not paved, and with a couple benches. So just a really passive space. And we talked then in the neighborhood meeting about the lift station relocation as well. And then at the Planning Commission meeting, there was one public comment that was in support of the project. This is the direct neighbor at 1409 Holdridge Terrace. And they were really appreciative of the project overall. And then we haven't received any other public comments after that. The Planning Commission's discussion just focused on understanding that lift station relocation, the role of the State Health Department in reviewing the plans, the floor plans and room sizes, the rationale for all of the design deviations, understanding that nature area better, understanding the rear facade changes that have been made since the concept plan, and then just general landscaping questions. And ultimately, the commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the application. They didn't have any specific conditions to add to the project, really, which is pretty unique for a project of this detail. But I think the applicant has done a nice, thorough job of getting as much of the issues taken care of as possible, with one being the ultimate tree plan. So the proposed motion tonight is actually 2 unique motions. And one is to adopt a resolution 10-2023 that approves all those requests. And then specifically for the zoning map amendment, we need an ordinance for that specifically. So we have an ordinance as well, Mayor.
So I know, Ms. Gellner, you need to step out. There is one quick question that I believe you're best suited to answer from Councilmember Iverson, if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. So Emily, you had stated for the wetlands that an average is okay in this area, but yet on the last application, the 20-foot setback was a continuous setback. I know there's different widths in this between these two, but why is this an average versus a continuous?
Yeah, great question. I did not work directly on the wetland work that was done through the engineering department, and I know that they follow some wetland rules that I'm not as familiar with. I just wanted to scan the staff report to see if we have any code requirements in here. The city serves as the local government unit with the responsibility of approving the wetland buffer. So this was under the authority of the city engineer. I'd have to look through either our city codes or look for other guiding documents of how he made that determination that a buffer averaging plan would be sufficient for the specific wetland.
Maybe to add, while you're looking for that, a statement that the previous application made is that they received Minnesota wetland approval. And there could, I quickly heard that. Are there other necessary agencies that needed to give approval on this application? I didn't see any letters.
I didn't see any either. So I think that because the city serves as a local government unit with the responsibility of the wetland buffer, at least specific to the wetland, we don't have any other environmental approval agencies involved here. I could check with the applicant though, in case the only one that comes to mind for me would be the watershed district, and that might be where we are acting as the local government unit here. This is with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District.
Do we normally act as that agency? My understanding, we do. And did we do that for Black Dog as well?
Well, as you can see, my knowledge of wetlands is not as strong as it could be. So I think I'm a little deficient in this area, so I'd have to look to the city engineer for more expertise.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
And you're welcome. And I think what the previous applicant may have been speaking about is when the maps are created that we then incorporate into, it wasn't specifically maybe for the application itself in terms of getting an approval.
Right.
But for the creation of our wetland delineation maps.
Yep.
So that's two different things.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's.
Yeah. Did I?
Yes.
Was I correct in that? Okay. So, thank you, Ms. Gellner.
Sure, I can take
Yes?
a few more
No?
questions if you'd like.
We're good?
Okay.
We'll see you tomorrow.
I'll get the applicant's presentation up.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. We'll hold on questions while we'll have Mr. Shermack present as well, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Press the down button, like here or on there, doesn't matter.
You said
You
where?
just use the laptop.
Okay, where's it down?
The down arrow and then the up.
Two here.
I'm on my fourth one.
And then I'll just. I guess so. Right, we're good.
I have to take this because I might be around tomorrow if fires.
Good luck.
All right.
Casey,
Mr.
yeah,
Shermack.
you can come up.
Good evening.
Good evening, council and staff. Emily, hope your daughter is fine tonight. It's been a long night, and we have no snowstorm, so it looks like we're not going to be postponed. So, can you hear me okay?
We can, if you would please introduce yourself with your name and address.
I will. Thank you for the reminder. The name's Casey Shermack. I'm the owner of Pillar Homes and have a small consulting company that has this lifestyle flavor to it for this type of application. I live at 330 Wise Avenue in Wayzata and have for about 35 years lived in Wayzata. So I'm not exactly sure to start here. I'm going to do a little summary, and I'm going to have to say that the wetland one is one I better address right away because I am extremely knowledgeable of that and have put my best foot forward from the very beginning. So first of all, Minnehaha Watershed District did review this, has reviewed this. Mike Kelly requested that they reviewed this, but Wayzata is the governing decision body of that. There is no alteration in any way to the water behind the structure or next to it. There is no additional, so the wetlands, the water, and the surrounding area behind this, it's not a surrounding area, the abutting neighborhood, the abutting water has not been altered in any way. I want to make sure that that's very clear and very straightforward. The second thing that happened is the buffering and the average buffering between and around the structure of the parking has never changed from the first application to the second one. I want to repeat that. It has not changed in any way. We've not altered the water, we've not altered the wetlands, and we have not changed from one application to the next. There was some indication, I hope Councilmember Iverson did not interpret something wrong, but there has been no deviation from the first plan till now. Buffer averaging is very common to do, and it was approved by the governing body and reviewed by staff. So that is my best answer for this. As I jump into just a little summary here, I have a few more visuals that I believe will be helpful. The presentation was very thorough. From then till now, one of the things that was very fascinating to me is because of the PUD, I believe an ordinance or a review process for the city of Wayzata had been changed kind of from the start till now. So we had to resubmit and do all the review process again. So we have had 2 neighborhood meetings, 1 with the beginning paperwork and 2 with this current application. Very positive, very good feedback. About the same 5 to 7 people showed up at both neighborhood meetings, and both are right here in the city hall. It was from that meeting that a few changes were disclosed to them and or encouragements from them or things that they would like to see, mostly pertaining to the common nature park between the structure and the neighborhood. And that's where most of my new visuals will help, I believe, here. And some of the slight improvements that came from staff over the year-long process of review caused some of the landscaping and the tree preservation to be altered, to be in complete reviewed, completely reevaluated, and now meets and matches the tree ordinance from the new forester here at the city of Wayzata, and the transition from the previous subcontractor that did trees to Bennett Myron, the on-staff forester. That extensive review has been very thorough, and we have been able to plant, use, and meet the tree ordinance thoroughly based on his review of that. I don't believe it would even need to be changed at this point. Some of the new things that came into play with that tree ordinance was you can't have anything more than 20% of one species. I think emerald boar ash has influenced that significantly. So if you plant too many of one thing, we don't know what might next change with our environment and our climate, so we don't have too many one things need to be replaced or die. So that review has been done by the city forester, and the landscaping plan has been modified slightly, only with quantities of each and or to prevent anything more than 20% of one product to be grown on site. We also had a request to show things that would be substantial or in the 10-year growth cycle, so the plantings would meet and be able to prosper, and all of that strategy was implemented into this landscaping plan. So this particular piece of land is very, very unique. We nestle in here, and as you know, over time, this has been owned by the state, owned by the county, now an independent person, and a group that I represent to kind of bring this to a head as a really valuable use. We find ourselves in jumping through a lot of hoops because the zoning of institutional is really designed a little bit more for the inner bowels of Wayzata and not an extremity to the outside. So some of the landscaping, the architectural deviations that have been made maybe would be really important on Lake Street when you're standing 10 feet away from a building and you have towering experiences of buildings, and that's why there's been breaks requested and things like that in institutional zoning that apply when you're actually standing next to a building. This is more of a residential neighborhood, abutting a residential neighborhood. It's going to be used for residential use, and our goal was to grow upon that residential feeling and experience and enhance this neighborhood was the main goal. So we have kind of a label of institutional and a goal that was not intended to be institutional feeling at all. The goal is to be a Lake Minnetonka, lakeside home, basically, and in this case for 40 new residents. So the piece of land, very rare, and it will be a wonderful and hopefully a beautiful entrance on the east end of Wayzata, which was our main goal. And I think this strategy has worked very well with the neighbors and our first run through this. We have, there were some requests by you all sitting here. There's a slight change with Councilmember Parkhill, but for the most part, to improve and or make some slight modifications to the exterior, which we did. See if I can point some of them out here. I was able to do the same rendering, but a little better view from certain angles, which I thought would be helpful. The front of the building here, all we really changed was the pitch of the two shed roofs in the middle. There was a minor review process or minor deviation that the angle for which that started should not go over the average mid-range of the roof. So we did a nice slight alteration on the front. It was not requested by anybody. It was pointed out by staff. This particular angle I thought was very nice and another new perspective of looking at it. Here, one of the things that was changed was the cupola over the entrance. In a previous submittal, there were two on the large gable going from end to end on the building. There was a minor little deviation to the architectural review that can only be 3 feet above the highest point, and it was 6 feet. So moving one, which drew your eye to the east end of the building and our main entrance, felt a little more comfortable, and then obviously alleviated anything else that pertained to that. Again, very small details, but nice improvements to the architectural exterior that started with the first application. I thought this view would be important. This is where the lift station was first located on site. And it would have been able to work around, everybody did acknowledge that, but Mike Kelly and staff, applicant engineers, all had met on site quite a few times just to kind of walk through in real world. And it was done at that point with on-site meetings that the lift station be moved to kind of the line break between the natural park area and what I would call the new structure and the parking. So it moves a little closer to what I would call the homes where it's going to be needed the most, and the distance kind of didn't work against the system, it just wasn't needed. So it became very positive for the new building and the new house structure, for the memory care and for the neighborhood. So that is been worked out with staff and turned out to be a really nice amenity. But it did change the front here and made it more appealing in everybody's opinion. So we thought this was an important thing to point out.
Mr. Schremek?
Yes.
Just a quick question. Well, you can actually stay on this slide. What are the darker squares? What do they represent below the windows?
That was going to be some sort of heating or cooling amenity that would do with HVAC. And it is not needed. It is not needed anymore.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So like a splitter or something?
It would a dual fuel or a split mini was going to be the concept that was used. Okay. And that actual shaded little cube there, in retrospect, very good question, is not going to be needed. That will be the siding material around it.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. One of the other things that we've tried to keep our eye on the ball between our first application and the second application that's virtually identical, the governing body that oversees this switched from, say, the building division at the state of Minnesota to the health department. And it changed a variety of things internally for this particular building. And that is one of them that affected the HVAC. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Yep. I included this for tree replacement and for plantings and locations on site. The areas around the parking area, Forrester Myron did, as I said, put some pretty extensive review into this. The parking area that sits between the two entrances, he determined that there would need to be either a little half wall, which meant a requirement, a fence requirement, or something else that was an option for us in the landscape section. And we elected to do a little fence area there, modified and improved all the plantings around the parking area along the south side of the building, and also on the southwest side of the building to meet the requirements of no more than 20%. And then for the most part, what came up is something here, and this was a benefit that came from the meeting with the neighbors, the second meeting. The area that shaded, I'm going to say north, a little bit to the right side of the location map here, indicates where the new lift station is going to be. It's on all the engineering plans. It's all set. And this is the location that the new lift station is going to be. So it's not going to be in the middle, as I stated. It's going to be up here near the lot line between the natural park area and the building lot line. It is in this area. If you were to go down there and look at the lift station, it's not necessarily that large. You know, most everything's underground, but there are some visual things there that we're planning on shielding a little bit if it was to stay in the middle of the building. And with this location, it was requested by the neighbors and became a very obvious addition, was to enhance the landscaping in the park more and create a little buffer around the lift station. So we decided to enhance, like I said, fit and complete the tree ordinance requirement, and then added landscaping here, which really on the previous landscaping plan, there was no additional landscape in this area. So we enhanced the park area, and was a very fruitful feedback from the neighbors, and was one that we've been able to implement and kind of draw out. Again, the trees and the amenities that go on there are placed for the benefit to kind of buffer to the neighbors, and also create a little green space buffer from the lift station. There's been analysis done with our landscaper in collaboration with at least a reaction from the city forester about the trees that are located with the white dots, how large they are, shade, things like that. So we have been fairly advanced in this, this modification, and hopefully comes across that way. The question again? The white darts are the trees that all stay. As a matter of fact, unless they were diseased, the tree forester has been out on numerous occasions. Remember, there's been specialists, tree doctors from my side. It's been a little while here. He's actually retired. And we've actually had a second tree doctor specialist. In all openness and honest, we actually employed now the person that used to be the consultant for the city of Wayzata, who the forester Bennett Myron replaced, so that I have complete continuity for trees and plantings. So the nature area, which is the buffer between our residential neighborhood and this building, is really our limelight of this whole project. If you really want to think, we want public benefit from this. It's a nice amenity and a goal of a PUD. And that area between there has most of our large trees, which we get to keep. There's been recommendations of additional trimming and pruning and forestry feedback so that the longevity of the trees is even enhanced even more. But there are no additional trees unless they were diseased and already removed and requested to be removed. So the dots stay. And that site, that's an overall real benefit. I would say it's an A+ amenity to the application and a star for the neighborhood that adjoins it, and causing a very warm fuzzy between what's going to potentially be there and their existing neighborhood. So those are most of my additional slides. They're not terribly complicated because they weren't really intended to be. When talking with Community Director Gellner, we just said, she said that this would probably be a nice amenity to show the slight changes that came from a neighborhood meeting. And in this case, I've done numerous of those over the years, many of those, and this has been one that's been the most fruitful because there's been a few moving parts, and I'm just going to reference the lift station. The actual structure of the property hasn't really changed a lot. I do want to finish a little bit here. The exterior, I might have turned off something that I shouldn't have. I can go backwards. Just trying to see if there's a few more slides. Nope. I do apologize. In your packet, on the rear of the structure, there was comment made at the last city council meeting. I was able to pull out and create a shed roof in a similar nature to the one on the front of the building. We have two shed roofs and an architectural bump out on the front in the middle of our two gables. And on the back in the middle, we did create a bump out. It's a 3-foot bump out from the walkout all the way to the roof, and we created a shed roof on that. And then we created product.
Could you pull up the rendering of what you're referencing?
We could be in trouble here.
Or it's not represented in the renderings that are here in this slide
It is
deck?
not. You happen
okay.
to see, yes. Oh, you know why? She went right into just a file that I did on a slideshow. So I'm in that slideshow. I'm actually not in her presentation. see those right there.
Well, while,
That's what I just did. It's not what we're looking for. Oh, this is it? Okay, now you're in the right section.
it may be in our packet already on page 244.
Oh, okay, I can go up to that.
While Jeff's looking for that, council, any questions of the applicant? No? Alex, any questions? No? Jeff?
No, I'm good.
No?
Thank you.
Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor.
Just one second. Mr. Shermack, while Jeff's working on that, are you able to answer some questions from the council?
I am.
Okay, fantastic. Councilmember Iverson.
There we go.
Thank you, Mayor. Just mainly, a couple things, Casey, is that I did know that you didn't change any things. My concern really is, and has always been, even when you came with the concept plan, is really about the wetland. And the concern that at some point in the building, you will only be 12 feet from the wetland. And so just wanted to get that question answered from staff about why we see different variations and how we allow boundaries from wetlands. So that was clarified for me. And then, do you remember, you took down some trees last summer. Do you remember how many of those trees and if there was a fee applied to that?
That was all considered with the tree calculation for our replacement. As far as, let's just say it was addressed in the overall tree review, which had to do with inches and/or taken down, what kind of tree they were. In this particular case, I do believe that most of them were ash. So the answer is yes and no.
Okay, so I don't know if staff knows if those trees were represented in the tree survey that you gave us.
Oh, yes, they were. They always have been. I do
They
know
always
that
have
answer.
been.
Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off, but I do know by you rewording the question so that they would always have been documented and found, and never as if they did not exist.
Okay,
That is correct.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, thank you, Councilmember Iverson. So the image in the bottom right-hand side, that is the,
Yes, that's
The bump
we'll
out.
call it the south exposure.
okay.
Okay? The center part there, which creates a little bit of a vertical element, it relieves, causes a relief in the roof structure, adds a little bit of a shed roof concept on the top, and an opportunity to change the material. Thank you. Thank you. A little larger, yep. Yep, there's two, those bottom two kind of grab the vertical nature of the element we tried to create. Around the windows, right there, that's a very good photo, thank you.
Casey,
We, again, changed product, and we created just a textured change around the windows in a more vertical fashion wherever the three windows line up.
Casey, just another question.
Yep,
Will you go back to the large, that one, thank you.
yep.
There are two little, I'll call them awnings, for lack of a better word, on the first floor, one is over a doorway and one is over a doorway and a window.
Yes.
Do you know what, off the top of your head, what the width of that is? And the reason I ask that
Yes, please.
is that there could be people in wheelchairs, and if they're only like 3 feet deep, they're not actually going to cover you from rain. So I understand you did it for visuals, but there could also be some
Yeah.
other intended things from that if somebody needed to get out of the rain, and are they wide enough to actually provide any type of protection?
I would have to tell you that the main goal was strictly architectural, not functional. And I do believe that they're, well under 3 feet, kind of, horizontal out from the building. It would not be if you're making a suggestion, I would have to say it's not a bad one, but it was clearly an architectural amenity that was added, just to give some relief to the, depth of the vertical on the back. But I don't believe, if I was to tell you, right, that staff and/or guests with their, say, parents or somebody that's there, not a whole lot of people are going to go out when there's inclement weather. I'm assuming you're referring to if you would get caught out there quick. Yes, and have to make a dash to get in. But for the most part, I mentioned at a planning commission once that I have, under no uncertain circumstances, tried to lower that fence and make it more transparent over my go at this, and I can't. It's not the rules don't allow you to do that because they don't want to make sure that nobody can get out. Okay.
So maybe I'll make a suggestion.
Sure.
To go back and just visually look to see if you were to make it a little bit wider for two reasons. One, to make it functional, and one, aesthetics based off of the size and the scale of that particular section of the building.
Yeah.
Would it be more in proportion?
I don't think the applicant would. I certainly would not. I actually don't mind the suggestion.
Okay.
I think the one thing that is going to come into play here is that almost everybody when they go out will have a guest with them or a visitor of some sort that will be taking them out there. And I think they'll be very prudent to make sure they don't take mom or dad out in inclement weather. I do like it still more for the architectural, even the depth of it.
Okay, thank you for being open to that.
Yeah.
And then just for clarification, when you were saying width, you don't mean across the span of the building, you're talking more the depth to it? Okay, thank you. We're just making sure that you and Mr. Shermack are speaking the same thing. With regard to some of the lengths of building that have no windows, no doors, do you have an approximate size for the length we're talking about? It's always difficult in a rendering to gauge, and the print is so small, even with my glasses. It's not
Yeah. It is in the area where that does happen is typically stairs or something along those lines on the interior of the building, or a wall section of a room and a bathroom where windows would not be appropriate either for bed placement or privacy. I would say that they're somewhere in the area of 20 to 25 feet based on the depth of a room and a bathroom and tying things together that would make the spaces functional that are detailed in the interior on the floor plans. So if you're asking, because it's they're not on the front, as you can tell.
Yes.
And most of the rooms on the front are not most of the living, they're more common spaces, so we had a little more flexibility.
No, I asked the question, there's so much thought and detail and care to the front elevation.
Yes.
And then it's almost a dichotomy on the back without the changes in roof lines and the changes in materials, and so it just looks so vastly different. I'm sure there's a functional reason for it, but also from my understanding, that looks like a very big blank wall, and I just want to make sure that we're approaching this with the same care and sensitivity on the back that we are from the front.
And that interpretation of yours we did try to address it as best we could with a blend of interior view by the health department and a meshing of details from the inside to the outside. There was a little bit of that taken out of our control, which I have to say, I feel the applicant worked pretty diligently to enhance either texture changes and some color. We didn't go as far any further than that on the back. There was simplicity that was achieved, which you're bringing up. So there's a blend of kind of inside to outside with lack of control. The front was in our control, and the two sides, or at least half of the west side and the entire entrance was more in our control. Could there be something done with some green, some more landscaping, some arborvitae up close to those areas to buffer them a little bit and soften, say, the entry level? I would have to say yes. Yeah. And you're going to find that the applicant is, very, very willing to adapt, if you will. And that has been noticed in the landscaping plan and the review that we've done on, I think it's been up to 4 reviews so far with foresters and our tree forester and the exiting forester and the new one who's the exiting forester who's now our new consultant. So we've really worked hard to kind of incorporate that. Could there be more? That would be pushing us past the requirement? Absolutely. And just to soften what I would call the simple architectural walls, if that makes sense, on the back.
Absolutely. No, I think, in just a moment. I think just from the perspective of both neighbors,
Yep.
current, and potential future neighbors, that would, I would say that would, it's not going to hurt anything.
Sure.
Right? And the more we can soften that, and also from the perspective of the residents, right? That all of this nature and the plantings
Yes.
contribute to a lovely living environment.
Yes, I would,
So,
yes, that is an absolute perfect blend that we have been shooting for. I will tell you that your feedback with almost this entire council, we did work towards many of the comments and was not taken lightly, because this is a very strong project for our community. And we feel, having stood before the same body for over 35 years now, I've never had one where I've never had neighbors like at least come
I'm
over
not
and-
that old, Mr. Shermack.
I know that. Your predecessors is what I meant. You know, probably 5 different councils now. So you are not that old. Yes, I know. Yes. So
Close, but not quite.
yes. Yep.
Oh, at least we can have a good laugh about it.
Yes.
I think Councilmember Iverson had another question for you.
The reason for the question is what the mayor brought up in regards to that open span that you have. And so I did open up on page 238 in our packet. It does look like the corner where you've got a set of windows and then there's that big span. There's actually a bedroom there. And so potentially, as you go back and look at maybe making a few alterations, you potentially could add a set of double windows on all 3 floors that would help to break up that big span of open space.
There's a subtlety that I'm not an expert at, but where you want one wall with one window on the other wall. Could there be a single window added or some stuff? Possibly. I do know that this has been vetted pretty well due to the amount of windows, where they're located, and the amount of light that could come out of them towards the neighbors, or amount of light that could not come out of them towards the neighbors. So at a planning commission, we did, or the neighborhood meeting, excuse me, we just talked about the windows and what kind of light and that could come out. So in this case, that corner blank space, if you will, on the west side was preferred a little bit more by the neighbors because there was no windows towards them.
This is actually into the private space on the back side of the building.
More
it
by the
doesn't-
patio area and
Yes,
stuff?
exactly.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, and it looks like right now, just replacement, you put a bed and then a dresser. And so some people don't like a window above their bed, but potentially could go over the dresser. And having natural light.
Yes, oh, I
It's
see, you're
always
on that
positive.
side over there, yep.
I'm on that
Yep,
side, yeah.
yes,
The other, I
gotcha.
completely agree, because
Yeah.
I did bring that point up.
Yes, I knew it came from somewhere, I thought.
Yeah, because sometimes we don't think about that, and then you get kind of that ambient light in hallways that we think about after the project. So again, food for thought as you go back with your team to just look at, I think that would maybe help take care of that big blank. So, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? No? All right. Can we bring up thank you, Mr. Shermack. I will bring it back to the council for discussion. If we could please pull up the proposed motions. Or not motions, I guess. Motions? Yeah, thank you. It's late. It's been a long day. Oh, my. All right, would anyone like to begin? Yep, great, thank you, Jeff. Will you turn on your mic, please? Thank you.
I, kind of jumping in, I think I remember this coming through planning, maybe a year and a half ago or something like that. I like everything about it. I think it's much needed in our community. We need this service. I think the trees will help you in the back, and I think anything you can do to give a better premium look back there with some landscaping, stone wainscoting, stone wall, shutters, whatever, is going to help you get more rents and just be a nicer looking building. So that's, you're incented there too. So I'm for the PUD general plan and the amendment to the official zoning map. Really that simple.
Very good. Thank you. Who would like to go next? Anybody? Oh, thank you.
I agree with Councilmember Parkhill, and I support these proposed motions as well. I think it's a good application and a great addition to Wayzata.
Perfect. Thank you, Councilmember McDonald. Kathy, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Well, Casey, I think I walked in after reviewing this packet with probably a different mindset than I have right now. So thank you for being open for some of the considerations from the design part of it. But I think the biggest thing and an ask that I will ask tonight is perhaps we can put a condition, or we simply ask you to put a permanent fence up around the wetland during construction that contractors cannot drive over and potentially get into the wetland or potentially leave their supplies there. It happens, shouldn't happen, it does. You guys can't always be there to control what your contractors are doing. Having some type of a small temporary fence up, yeah, exactly. I would feel so much better about knowing that the right steps are in place to protect that wetland. We might not see the effects right away, but they're going to happen. I called in about a development where they didn't have any tree protection at all. They went out and they put some around the tree the next day because it's in my neighborhood. I drove by and all the building material was sitting right on top of the fence. So I think sometimes those little snow fences are meant to work, but contractors are in a hurry. They're going to just drop and go. And then you get the phone call. And so if we could make that a condition to just do that during construction, I would be completely in support of this in front of us today.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Iverson. Please don't let me forget to bring that up and then poll the rest of the council on that piece. Yes.
Madam Mayor, real quickly, if I could just note that the draft resolution does have a condition that goes to Councilmember Iverson's concern. Condition of approval is that the applicant complies with all code and policies applicable to days and times of work and construction management. So to the extent that a chain link fence would be required by our code or recommended by staff, I think that's a condition of approval now, just so you know.
Thank you.
And you want to make sure that that's a recommendation of staff?
Exactly.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Alex?
I think I'm next. We've seen this plan for over a long period of time, and most of the questions have been asked. They've been addressed. I will say I like the design. I like the plan. It's a valuable addition to the community. Mr. Shermack has been responsive to our questions, to our requests, and so forth. And I think ultimately this plan is a very good one, and I'll be excited to see it developed. So I'd be in favor of it.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, to further add to what my colleagues have said, I am in favor of the PUD general plan. It seems appropriate given the needs of the community. This certainly provides an amenity that we don't have on that side, and I appreciate the care that's been given to the aesthetics to make it look more residential than institutional. The lot combination, that's just kind of a no-brainer for this type of project. And the unit size variance, given this is going to be a memory care facility and our code does not take that into account with the unit sizes, I find it completely reasonable. And the zoning map amendment, obviously, again, given the change in zoning, The design deviations as well, as we're looking to put something different in a spot where we've been looking to put something for a long time, it makes sense. And I agree with you that a lot of our design standards are intended for, the tall buildings on Lake Street that are going to be surrounded by other tall buildings, and we want to be wary of that. So things relating to, the sidewalk placement and the break-in materials, and I can completely understand. I too was very concerned when I first saw it. I was like, wow, that's a lot to consider, but now that I understand it, I am in agreement. I would, as my comments indicated prior, and to Councilmember Parkhill's point, anything you can do to enhance the rear elevations and give that the care and attention that the front has been given, I would very much appreciate. I'm not going to design it for you. I'm going to trust that the landscaping and that, Ms. Alexander, who did the designs initially, can put pen to paper and make something work. But I think it is something that I think every community hopes for, and that is a facility, a home for people who need it, and the memory care associated with it. And it's not only just the care that they'll be receiving, but a beautiful place to live as well. So with that, we have two motions. So the
Madam Mayor, I think you can take this as one motion.
I can. Okay.
Yes, and the only caveat to what's on your screen, which is a little bit different from the packet, you would be approving the first reading of Ordinance 823. It'll come back on your consent agenda for the second reading. So what's on the screen is correct. I would just add approve first reading of Ordinance 823.
So let me go ahead and read this. I know. Can we make it just a little bigger?
I can do that, yeah.
Okay. All right, would someone care to make a motion to adopt Resolution 10-2023 approving PUD general plan lot combination unit size variance, zoning map amendment, and design deviations at 1405 Holdridge Terrace and 15419 and 15429 Wayzata Boulevard, and approve the first reading of Ordinance 823 amending the official zoning map of the City of Wayzata to rezone 1405 Holdridge Terrace and 15419 and 15429 Wayzata Boulevard.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Okay. Do you want to repeat it?
Yep.
No. That's a good one. All right, and a second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes. David, do we need to, is that condition stated clearly that it would be a chain link fence? Do we need to state that, or is it implied?
Madam Mayor and council member, it does not state chain link fence. It states that the applicant must comply with all city codes and policies related to construction management. And I'd probably recommend sticking with that language, just because they might recommend chain link fence in one area or some other sort of barrier in another. I think our policies and our codes and our staff would know best how to protect it. So that's my only thought on that.
So I think I can understand and appreciate where Councilmember Iverson's coming from. If we could ensure that we take the highest precautions, besides just the silt fence, to protect the wetland during construction from equipment and runoff or whatever the case may be, would that suffice? I mean, the highest possible care.
Yeah, and
It's going to be difficult, given the depths at some of the areas, to maybe put the chain link.
well, it shouldn't be, because it's really quite thin and it's been done before. Again, I have history to go off of. I can only go off of behavior I've seen in the past.
Okay.
And if it's not in there, the contractors will drive over whatever in front of it. And so I would prefer to have it be specifically spelled out.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember, we could certainly call out measures to protect the wetlands from any kind of intrusion. I guess I'd be concerned about I mean, we want to be consistent with best practices. I'm not the city engineer, I'm not staff, I don't know what those things are. Perhaps it is a chain link fence, but it might be something different that would be needed in some of that area. So that's what I'm getting at. But I certainly think you could amend your motion to include with, you know, the best practices for protecting the wetlands.
Could we, again, I know it's late, everyone, I apologize. Could we somehow incorporate the word permanent? Because the snow fences that we typically use, I would not consider permanent.
But would you want,
And just the wetland, a permanent during the construction of the property to be removed.
I mean, Madam Mayor and Councilmember, I guess, again, my concern is I'm not a technical expert on what would be the best measures to do that protection.
Because he's going to get my phone call. Because
So
he
I'm
knows
just-
I check on all the websites.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that's
think-
just my behavior. Sorry.
No, I appreciate your concern, and I think the mayor appreciates your concern. I just want to make sure we don't bake something into this approval resolution that would hamstring staff from deploying what really would be the most effective measures. And I would presume our policies and code would give staff the authority and ability to do that. I don't know if the city manager wants to weigh in on that.
I would say, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Iverson, that if there is, you know, we're going to treat every site as best practice as best as we can. So if there's specific direction you want us to take with regard to this development, we should have specific language in the approvals. I don't know if,
You want us to call out the type of fencing, though?
well, if that's the expectation of the council, and unfortunately we don't have that expertise here to say whether that would work or not, but maybe chain link where appropriate, or, you know, and maybe Mr. Shermack can respond to what he's willing to do, given the direction of the council now. But I think we should be a little bit more specific is if that's the expectation that the council has for us. Because otherwise we're going to just treat it like a normal development and do enforce and require best practices. But, you know, if you want that extra level just to ensure that the wetland's protected, that might be a little bit different.
Okay.
Mayor, can I take a moment and just tell my fellow council members why I'm so adamant?
Well, I think we
But it
know.
happened on this it happened with Casey.
Okay. But
And that's why.
I think we know, and we dealt with it. So what would you like to see on this development? You want to see a chain link fence?
Just around the wetland.
Okay. So,
Best practices as needed based off of staff for the other areas.
okay. So that is your condition for voting yes?
Yes.
Okay. How does the rest of the council feel about the condition? Because we have a motion and a second. So did you make the motion? Who made the motion?
I made the motion,
You
Mayor.
made the motion, and it was seconded by Councilmember McDonald. So you're amending
My motion.
your motion to include, is that correct? Am I stating
Yes, Madam
that
Mayor, I
correctly?
think procedurally it's correct. I'm not quite sure what the amendment would be. Was it, Councilmember Iverson, was it to put a chain link fence around the delineated wetland area and use other, is that really the only thing?
That's, yes.
Okay, I understand.
I'm not an expert on any of this either, so I, frankly, to be honest, would feel more comfortable going with how the code is written. So I'm gonna not second that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Could we ask Mr. Shermack what he
Can you
thinks?
turn on your microphone, please?
Could we ask Mr. Shermack what he thinks would best protect the wetlands? Because I'm sure he may have some ideas anyway.
Certainly, Mr. Shermack, would you like to come to the podium based on your development experience and understanding what Councilmember Iverson's concerns? And also further to that what you share with us today, are you going to be the developer during this project? Are you going to be overseeing
I'm going to oversee parts of it, yes.
parts of it? Okay.
And I was just informed that the contractor that will probably be doing this will be Rachel Excavation. They're the main contractor that works with the Minnehaha Watershed District. They've repaired and fixed numerous things for this watershed district. So I have zero issues acquiescing to Councilmember Iverson's passion. It's not a difficult thing to do. She is correct. There are some height things that if you get something a little higher, it's more visual and you can see it more, which helps. Chain link fence is just one product. There is higher product that is like silt fence, but it comes much higher and actually could create more of a visual break that actually could be more helpful than chain link because it's more visual and you need the same structure to hold it in place. We're willing to work with any of that, you know, between the construction zone and the wetlands. It's just not, I want to make sure her passion is at ease.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, we can all appreciate that with the changes in temperature, sometimes the shorter silt fence, right? You wake up one morning and boom, it's fallen over. You fix it in the afternoon and it's gone again. So it's a constant struggle. So given the length of time, I can certainly appreciate her concern, the amount of time that this project will be ongoing, and the sensitivity to the natural surroundings. So I would say chain link and, you know, in addition to whatever other means staff feels is appropriate to protect, you know, the site. So is anybody, so we have a motion with, did that answer your question, Councilmember Park? Yeah, that's great. So we have a motion. We do not have a second to the amended motion. Would someone like to second Councilmember Iverson's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councilmember Parkhill. Further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. That concludes oh no, it does not conclude new business. We have one last item. And the last item is to consider adoption of Resolution 13-2023, appointing a Parks and Trails board member. And this was part of our workshop earlier this evening where we interviewed a member of the community to serve on the Parks and Trails Board.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and yes, that is absolutely correct. I'll keep it brief. We had a vacancy on the Parks and Trails Board. It's a 3-year term, a little less than 3-year term. It expires on December 31st of 2025. And the City Council interviewed Bianca Jensen this evening and conducted an interview like we do for any applicant. Usually we do it at the end of the year as a part of that ongoing process, but we still had a vacancy and was fortunate enough to get a application submitted. So that was a good interview, and I guess I'll leave it at that if you have any questions about the process.
I don't have any questions about the process, but hats off to her and her passion for parks, including driving over 40 minutes to go visit her favorite park, which I just think is fantastic. And she's a user of our parks, but also of other parks in the metro area. So she's well-versed in playgrounds and activities. So I think she will be a great addition to the Parks and Trails. Anybody have any questions for Jeff or any further comments? No? Then would someone care to make a motion to appoint?
Really adopt, sorry, it's redundant there, but.
I'm sorry, what? Sorry, what?
I updated the ordinance on the fly here, or updated the resolution, the recommendation on the fly here now that we have an individual, so you can just, if the council sees fit, read that recommendation.
To appoint by resolution and fill the vacant seat of the Parks and Trails Board by appointing Bianca Jensen. Somebody make.
Madam Mayor,
No,
so
I
moved.
think we, Do we have a
Madam
an
Mayor,
amendment to your motion, I believe?
Madam Mayor, I think it'll work. That's
Oh,
fine.
perfect.
Resolution number, I think, right?
Because we really would like to adopt Resolution 13-2023, appointing Bianca Jensen to the Parks and Trails Board.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you.
So moved.
All right, and a second.
I'll second that.
All right, I think Alex beat you to the punch there, Molly. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Welcome Bianca Jensen to Parks and Trails. All right, that concludes new business. Now we have our city manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been walking around, so I lost my notes here, but I do want to recognize International Women's Day tomorrow. Really grateful to work for an organization and serve a council that is majority women run. So we look forward to celebrating tomorrow, and thank you, council, and for supporting all of our employees. I know all of our employees appreciate it, especially our women employees. So you'll see a lot of purple tomorrow because we're pretty proud of that. That's it.
Fantastic. Hats off to Public Works for all their hard work for several days during the snow and the snow emergencies. Seemed to be one that dragged on for quite a bit, and then they're probably getting ready for the next round,
later
aren't
this
they?
week. Yep.
Yeah, later this week. Yeah. Up to 6 inches, I think, or 7?
12 to 18, I heard.
Oh, bite your tongue.
That's what I said.
Go back to
Yeah,
Hawaii.
well, they have done just an absolutely fantastic job, and they've stayed safe along through that process. Did I hear mostly?
Only because Mike Kelly got injured on ice.
Oh, that was at his own home.
Well,
I
I
wasn't plowing the road.
Right, I just meant, I know, it's late. I'm sorry, I apologize, but I just meant like, be
No.
safe in general.
Yes.
People fall on ice and hurt themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I was referring to our snowplow drivers. Yes, so it's been a long, heavy lift this winter, I'm sure.
It has, and they take a lot of comments, questions, complaints, and they're always so friendly and despite the circumstances. So I really appreciate them. Appreciate Mike. I know he wished he could be at Public Works helping lead, but he's doing it from afar, and we're hoping he gets better soon.
Oh, good, yeah.
And Madam Mayor, I know that Councilmember Parkhill had one thing that he wanted to mention too.
Oh, yes, of course, please.
So I wanted to put a plug. I had a pretty amazing experience today with the Home Energy Squad that came out to my house, and they're partnering with Wayzata, and they're with the Center for Energy and Environment, and they came out, and 6 people were in my house for like 3 hours. They put weather stripping around 2 different doors. They changed over 100 light bulbs to LED. They they went into my attic, they looked at the insulation to see if it was adequate. They checked my furnaces, my AC units. I mean, they were just very thorough and great, and it cost me $35.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Because we have a partnership with them, and so I'm going to read their telephone number, so
Please.
anybody in Wayzata can call
There you go.
and get this group to come out. Home Energy Squad scheduling is 651-328-6221.
I love it.
It was really worth it.
Fantastic. We do have one important update about my travels.
Yeah.
Last week. So I had the pleasure of being invited to attend a session at the White House to talk about how the different federal programs that we've benefited from, how we've used them in the community. And I had an opportunity to meet with about 45 to 50 community leaders, politicians, from Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Minneapolis, Bloomington, St. Louis Park, Shorewood, And then a lot of nonprofits and NGOs, labor unions, all talking about how these programs have really benefited. And being able to make connections with state and federal partners. So as we explore other opportunities, we know who to call when we have a question. So it was a whirlwind of a trip, less than 24 hours, but it was just such an honor and a privilege to have been part of it. And I hope to be able to do it again and have a different story to tell. So they just need to send us more money.
Yeah.
And then we'll share that. But
And you
people
let
very
them, and you shared that too with them.
I know, yes. It was very kind and generous, but we need more. That was the message. So, no, there are some absolutely amazing things that are being done. I had the honor of meeting a fellow alum from St. John's University who is the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Secretary McDonough. And they're doing a lot of work with vets in Minnesota. He provided his email and telephone number, so if any vet has any issues whatsoever, to call him directly, to get vets in the door and treated quickly. And so from housing to medical care, anything vet-related, he's very passionate about and working to implement those programs. So I will be getting some more information for us as a city to also share out to our community so that everybody has all the resources they need in a timely fashion. So, yeah, so that was fun. That's it. That's all I have. All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
And a second?
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.